All right, we're going to call to order here at 5:01. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of council, administration, those in the gallery, and to those following online. Welcome to our regular council meeting for January 23rd, 2023. Mayor Choi and Councillor Loynes are representing our community this week at the Innovating Commerce Serving Communities Conference today, and they send their regards, but were not able to join us this evening. As council, we have a rotating schedule for Deputy Mayor, and I happen to be on the roster at this time, and so I'm happy to chair our meeting this afternoon. Members of council, this evening's agenda is in front of us. Councillor Plechko with the motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. That Town Council accept the January 23rd, 2023 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Administration, do we have anything to add to the agenda this evening?
Not at this time, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you for that. Members of council, we'll call the question. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Moving on to number 3 on our agenda, this is our public input session. This is the time that residents are able to speak to council about anything that is not on the current agenda this evening. Administration, is anybody registered to speak this afternoon?
Deputy Mayor, no one is registered.
Okay. Thank you. Members of the gallery, is there anyone present this evening that would like to speak to council regarding anything that is not on our agenda this evening? Okay. Thank you for that. With that, we'll move on to number 4 on our agenda, presentations and delegations. Nothing scheduled this afternoon. Number 5, statutory public hearing. Nothing scheduled there as well. Moves us on to 6, the adoption of council minutes. Councillor Hansard with the motion, please.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I move that Town Council approve the January 9, 2023 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you. Members of council, you've had the opportunity to read and review the minutes for January 9th, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections? I don't see either, so we'll call to question. All in favor? And that's carried. Takes us to number 7, council boards and committee council boards and committee minutes. There's nothing on our agenda this afternoon, which takes us to number 8 and bylaws. We have 2 items before us this evening. We'll begin with 8.1, the first reading of South Creek Stage 5 Land Use Bylaw Amendment. Administration, go ahead with your presentation.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. This evening we have 2 items related to land use bylaw for Council consideration. Each of these items are in their first reading, one for South Creek and one for Westera. Each area has had the applicants circulate a letter for notifications to the upcoming development, looking for any feedback from residents. To help with the discussion, the town has its manager of planning and development, Miles Dibble, present to field any questions and answers that he could provide. He also has prepared a presentation for both items. I will now turn over to our manager of planning and development for his presentations on the matters.
Thank you, Mr. Newstead. Good evening, council and the public. So the first bylaw is 2669 LUO 23. This is for the South Creek Stage 5. It's an area structure, it's a land use bylaw amendment. In terms of our planning framework in Stony Plain, there's 5 levels: intermunicipal, municipal planning, neighborhood design, land development, and site development. This application here falls under the land development, which starts with land use bylaw amendments and works down to the subdivision and land servicing. As we generally require most bylaws that go before council, we work with the applicant to make sure they can have some sort of an engagement event so that there's some public input prior to first reading. In this case, letters were sent to nearby property owners, a proposal summary, and a shadow plan were provided as part of that notice. There was an opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback, and there's a summary report that has been attached to the lead sheet. From a statutory plan level, there's the municipal development plan, and there's the South Creek area structure plan. In this case, you can see here a fairly old area structure plan, black and white. These are ones that are interpreted quite conceptually given their age. This one here again shows kind of a local road going down on the west side with one that veers off towards the west, a storm pond kind of central, and then some park space around that storm pond and towards the north. In terms of the specific area of stage 7, it's highlighted on the map before you with the red cross shading. As you can see, it's just a continuation of the road pattern to the north. South Creek Drive and South Creek Wind both go south. So this would be an extension of those two areas where the collector road, which is South Creek Drive, goes by the large stormwater facility, including some MR there between the road and the facility itself. In terms of the redistricting component of this land use bylaw amendment, there's proposed road, again showing a new collector road going east-west or left-right on the screen, and then going south. Let's see if I can show here. So again, this is South Creek Drive coming down south. There's a little bit of FD to P1, which is our parks district that would be adjacent to the existing park space over here. Just for context, this area over on the right side of the screen is the stormwater facility. In terms of the specific zoning it's being applied for, it's the R5, which allows for both front attached and rear products. In this case, there's an existing laneway on the north side between South Creek Wind and South Creek Drive. There would be a little bit of additional road right-of-way given for that. On the end of the block, there's some additional R5, which is our small lot mixed form residential district, which allows singles, semis, row housing, etc. This would continue the block similar to the north, where you've got along the collector a lane product, and then a lane product on the other side, and then adjacent to the quarter section boundary, you have a front attached area. This here highlights the areas a little bit better. So there is a zero lot line component to this. So the first part is the zoning itself that I showed on the previous slide. This slide here specifically shows where the zero lot line areas are, which is the yellow and kind of a yellow-green. So the yellow area is here, adjacent to the lane product, and then over here. Now again, the zoning for all of these areas, both shades of green, both shades of yellow, are all R5, but this just shows the intention of those areas. So the area on the south of where it says stage 5, or the east-west collector road, are the areas that are intended to be zero lot line. You can denote them on the map here by seeing kind of a double dotted line, or a dotted line next to a solid line. Again, the yellow and the yellow-green. And just to reiterate, the little area of kind of a teal blue color here is that which is going to the Parks District. So again, this is the first reading where we introduce the application in front of council. And as part of this, we are asking for council to consider issuing a public hearing. If council gives their consent for the public hearing and gives it first reading, we would advertising it in the paper and send notification to surrounding residences. And then that would tentatively be for a February 27th public hearing date, and at which point in time we would have a second and third reading as well. And then council's final decision on the motion, on the bylaw. And that leads for any questions. So, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation this evening. Members of council, will open the floor for questions specific to clarity and understanding on the presentation, but we'll reserve debate and discussion until after the motion is on the table. So any questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just turning to page 38 in our package. There's a map that notifies the notification area, and I'm just curious if administration could explain sort of the, if I'm reading this right, sort of the cutout for most of South Creek, why the area seems to be such a large area, but we seem to have not informed the people on South Creek Link and South Creek Wind.
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Meyer. In this case, when we're looking at the notification area, we usually take into consideration the traffic and where they would flow and where they are in orientation to that. So we predominantly saw that the western side of South Creek would be the most impacted by this directly, including the two large quarter sections, both to the east and the west.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pletchko, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just going to go off of Councilor Myers. So that's a main corridor that comes through there that services both sides of that development. And I'd like that for clarification. Again, you talk about that servicing the one side, but it actually services both sides, and it clearly both services the far side even more, because that is the only access in and out of that portion of it. So again, I go back to, why would we not include all of South Creek when that is the major portion of it, on that aspect of it? And I guess maybe just a further question to that is it possible to notify all of the people when we go back to, if this passes first reading, is it possible to be able to notify all people in that area for that reason?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Pletchko. Fair point. We do try to balance the number of individuals that we are sending out these mail-outs in consideration of sometimes they can be quite large, in the point of thousands sometimes. In this case here, if council does wish, we could definitely expand that to include the rest of South Creek there, but it was kind of a balancing act of who would be directly impacted versus indirectly impacted, and that was the decision that was made at the time. So, thank you.
Just one further thing to that. Regarding your zero lot lines, if I recall, what I'm looking for is clarification. I see before us two of them tonight. When we talked about the zero lot lines being allowed within Stony Plain, I think back to the council that we were talking about that, and we were looking for a small area that would have a project that we could all see whether that actually worked or fit within our community. And I'm just wondering, we see two before us this evening. Is there a reason that we see two?
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Pletchko, I'll start an answer for that and ask the manager planning to maybe add to my comments here. In this, to your point with the starting, this is the first, since the land use bylaw update, the last land use bylaw update, these are the first applications of zero lot lines that the town has received. They came in conjunction. So it felt it was, they happened to come at the same time, bringing them forward at the same time, had some good synergies to have the same discussion. And as part of the land use bylaw, the intent from council was that these be reviewed by council and have the discussion on behalf of the community. So, which is why they're here together tonight. If the manager of planning wants to add to that.
I would just add to that that the, again, how large of an area that would be a pilot, I guess, is a consideration. And in this case, there's approximately 1 hectare of land in total amongst the two areas. Really, this is up to the applicant, in this case, the land developer here for both these two neighborhoods, to choose where they apply that for. And evidently, the landowner has determined that this would be best to kind of see in these two different areas how it would be received in each of them. I'd also open it up for when we do, if we get to the public hearing, there would be an opportunity to ask the landowner directly.
Oh, so, and just one thing further, if I could. So changing the land use bylaw, when we're changing this, is it specific to just this application, or will that be specific to the land use bylaw that will make it available for everybody?
Through your Deputy Mayor to Councillor Pletchko, what was decided at council was to make a regulation by which there's a map in the zero lot line development section of the land use bylaw, and only the areas that are placed within that map are eligible for zero lot line development. So therefore, both these two applications, this bylaw before you now, as well as the second one coming up, have a specific area designated for that. So it would only be allowed within those two areas as determined.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Hansard.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So when we try something new, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to our general manager and manager, I believe that it's really makes good sense to move slowly and extremely visibly. And I'm in total agreement with Councillor Palechko's questioning why we would not notify all those people in South Creek. If I'm pulling out of my street and I'm going to be impacted by 39 new dwelling units, on average 2 cars per dwelling unit, I would consider myself to be important enough in these decisions that I should have been notified. The last thing we want to do when we're trying something is to not invite everybody to the table that could possibly be immediately affected. Surely when we look at the map, the most immediately affected are that first section of that development that comes south right next to this new idea proposal. So the thoughts that I have are we need, no matter what our normal scope is for notifying people, if this was just the same kind of development that we've had across town in many different neighborhoods, that's one thing. This is a new idea that we're trying to be so careful to make sure people don't feel blindsided by, because that makes people upset. And then you've got people coming perhaps for first reading when no decision's going to be made, there's no public input. We're just deciding here, usually in the positive, to allow an idea to come forward, to see what the public reaction is, to see what people have to say, and all the other people that are affected, those that want this kind of housing, because they believe that it will offer a less expensive home option for them, as well as those who might be opposed and concerned about their neighborhood. So I would just suggest that perhaps we could be a little overly cautious in making sure people get notified. I have a couple of questions, but I just wanted to know, will the developer be coming forward for us to ask questions of the developer this evening, Mr. Deputy Mayor?
You can pass to administration, but I believe they are not presenting this evening. This is just first reading, so they'll have the opportunity to present if it passes today at second and
Then,
third.
okay, thank you. Then I see they're here to judge reaction, and it's good they're in the room. I just wanted to say that I'm going to put a couple of thoughts I have on the table, and I'd like some clarification when we do have the opportunity to hear from them. One, when we back these smaller lots, 0 lot line lots, up against the other lots, basically you get 1.5 lots for every, you're getting 2 houses on a space that would be 1.5 of the lots just to the immediate north. Over in West Terra, it's 1.5 of these lots, 2 of these lots for every 1.5 of the other lots. So I believe those other lots are not regular bigger lots, they're the average lots that we would see in a neighborhood. When you are adding that many extra lots, which the idea of which is to supposedly make things less expensive, at least for the first end user, the first buyer in these neighborhoods, I would like to know how many extra lots were realized from each of these developments, both here and in the next bylaw that we will consider. So when the developer comes forward, I'd like to hear we gained 2 extra lots. The savings from that will be passed on to the end user, split across the number of lots in each of those developments, which can be a sizable savings to those first end users. We have no control over what happens with the other people that buy those lots in the future. The other thing is, I guess that's it. How many extra lots do you get? What is that cost savings that I'm certainly hoping I'm going to hear will be passed on to the end user, not just extra money in the developer's pocket, although goodness knows the developers can also use some extra dollars, given what the market will be like going forward in this country. I think I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor. They weren't really questions, but they will be at the next meeting.
And I appreciate that clarification. I was going to ask if you were looking for commentary this evening or notice for...
Oh, I'm always looking for commentary, but thank you for acknowledging that.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just have a couple of comments and then just one point of one question after that. Just for a point of clarity, we're talking a lot about notice areas and what have you, but the town actually has not enacted any notice at this point in time because this is the first reading. So my understanding is what we're seeing in the presentation today was pre-work that was actually done by the developer for them to garner public interest and public feedback prior to even bringing this to first reading. Would that be correct?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie. In this case, when we receive a pre-application, we work with them to determine an appropriate area. So this was a mail-out area that we gave them in consultation between the 2 parties, both the town and the applicant.
Excellent, thank you. So as per the MGA requirements, there will be a certain distance that typically is required to be notified of the public hearing that's coming up and of the potential change. Now in the town, if memory serves me right, I believe we go double what the minimum standard in the MGA is. Will part of South Creek Link or South Creek Wind be captured in that area of required notice?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie, based on what has been discussed here, I'd say that we're going to take the entire area of South Creek in our notification of the public hearing if granted by council. With that said, there is no specific set number. It is an area, all adjacent lots sort of thing, and then informally we have sort of a policy or a practice that we take by which we take usually 90 meters and then an additional 300 meters and kind of use within that. So again, kind of in terms of that area, if we just took the 300, more than that has been included already, but given what is said tonight, we'll increase that to the entire area of the neighborhood.
Excellent, thank you very much. I do find it interesting on the survey that the developer placed out, they received 0 responses. So I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's very interesting given what's being proposed to see 0 responses. One quick question before I get on to my main question in regards to the public hearing. Public hearings typically occur at closer to the beginning of our agenda, with our council meetings starting at 5 p.m. Is there an opportunity, given the topics of discussion out of these public hearings, to have that public hearing itself potentially start a little bit later to ensure that the residents who may be interested do have appropriate and adequate time to attend?
Thank you for the question. Specific, are we allowed to set certain times for public hearings? Yes. I think the only stipulation, but I'll just, if I'm corrected here, is if we set a time of, say, 7 p.m. for it, we cannot begin before 7 p.m. We can begin after that, I think, within, reason, but we have to, in the event that you're in advance of that time, you have to wait. You cannot hold it until the scheduled time.
Excellent. Thank you, Town Manager. And the reason I ask that is, again, as I mentioned, they typically occur very early in our agenda. We oftentimes have many items that occur after that. So I feel it would maybe be appropriate if we could look at a potential start time on the public hearings of, say, 6 p.m. to allow residents adequate time to get home from work, make sure they have the opportunity to get to council chambers in time to hear the discussion, hear the presentations, and then make sure they're here for comment. That would allow us, if we have any other business on our agenda, we could address that business first prior to that starting. If that's an opportunity, I think that's something that we should explore. And then if I may, Deputy Mayor, just for one last question. This is a question of clarity. On page 16 in the last paragraph, it references the secondary access road that was to be required for stage 4B. This is the access road that is likely to connect it with Veterans Boulevard. Again, just under general understanding, as this subdivision was continued to develop out, that road would be a requirement as a secondary access. Can administration just advise a little bit around what would be the benchmark for the requirement of that? What say population or threshold has to be hit in order for that secondary access to actually be required and constructed?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie, I don't have the specific standards handy right now, but I know that there is a benchmark, and that when we were looking originally at 4B in terms of the stage of that, it was close to that threshold, which is why anything beyond that would have required that. This here being smaller than that stage, and that stage not proceeding at the time, that's why we're bringing this forward here without requiring the second access. So you would expect it for the next stage,
Okay,
as per that requirement.
Thank you. And before public hearing and the second reading, would we be able to get a little bit of a briefing note on that requirement and what those stipulations would be, just so we have that information?
Yes, we can do that.
Excellent, thank you. Let me just double check. I believe that's all for me on this, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Yep, thank you.
All right, before we move ahead with the motion, are there any other questions from council for clarity and understanding? With that, thank you, administration, for the presentation, and taking the time to answer the questions of council. Thank you as well for taking under advisement the feedback of council in terms of the notification area and the work that can be done to ensure all residents of South Creek are notified prior to that public hearing. With that, I'll ask Councillor Laurie with the motion here, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I will move that Town Council, 1, give first reading to bylaw 2669/LUO/23 to amend land use bylaw 2654/LUO/22, and number 2, to authorize administration to proceed with newspaper advertising and notification of a public hearing to be held on February 27th, 2023 for bylaw 2669/LUO/23.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. We'll open it up to council for discussion and debate. Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just follow up to my question in regards to the start time. Would a specific start time have to be identified in this motion, or is the request of administration enough to make that a consideration?
The request is enough for administration.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. Do have a couple of questions related specifically to zero lot line development. You know, if this is approved here this evening, and I know we have another bylaw amendment proposal to come forward here this evening, but you know, we had the discussion about, you know, a pilot project, a trial. You know, my question is, what does this look like moving forward? You know, is the developer, Qualico in this case, you know, going to be back in a month or two looking for some additional zero lot line developments? I guess looking for some commentary around some expectations as a municipality for how we move forward with future zero lot line development.
To the Deputy Mayor and all of council. In terms of what, again, council decided was, given the map and the actual having to come to council to make that change, a land use bylaw amendment each time, effectively, they will have to come each time. So in essence, regardless if it was a trial, a pilot, or what terminology is used, it's a threshold style approach that council determined. So it's really up to the market in this case. In this case, this landowner has brought 2 applications simultaneously through for this. It's not to say there's other developers that won't come forward. from administration standpoint, we need to be cognizant of what's going on, inform council, and then council to make an informed decision on those matters. So it'll be about, I would say it's really up to the developer and the development community to determine when they want to bring these forward. And I don't really want to speak for them because it's at their discretion. Thank you.
No, and I can certainly appreciate that. The question comes from, the idea of evaluating success of a project such as this that is new for our community. And when we first discussed, changing our land use bylaw to allow, the possibility of zero lot line developments, we had quite a robust discussion around some of the experiences of neighboring municipalities or other municipalities who had implemented these developments in their area. And so, when we look forward, I guess we're looking maybe for some commentary on how we track the success of a zero lot line development, so that as council we can have the information that we need to make decisions on the viability of zero lot line in our community and what that may look like for additional projects moving forward.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just some quick comments on and answers to your question there. Whenever we're introducing anything new or evaluation, as you're pointing out, we're looking through a variety of different lenses. So the first part of this process at first reign through to the public hearing is just the initial public feedback that we get as part of this process, understanding the initial community engagement and concerns that may be brought up or other opportunities that may be realized through the public engagement. That's one measure. As these developments come online and as new requests come on, we incorporate lessons learned from into our development processes and ultimately ask questions that we hear back from the community and from council as we go through these proposal evaluations with the developers. As I think I'm hearing from the deputy mayor there, some of these items operationally and other concerns, we get some feedback from municipalities, as you mentioned. So we have some understanding from our neighboring municipalities as well as just from our own staff in-house that we engage in dialogue with our developers ahead of these proposals making it to council. And one thing in this particular process that council has is that these proposals have to come here ahead of just being ahead of other approvals that would otherwise be seen. So there are a few tools in our toolbox right now that we're utilizing. This is the first one that we're discussing tonight. But we, as more of these proposals come online, we do incorporate those tools and other tools as we learn them into these as we go.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, if I can maybe just supplement that a little bit too. I think the other aspect, should council see fit to go forward or approve these requests, there would be some. We would have to have something in place to monitor the ongoing operations. So I think to be open, I guess, or straight, some of the zero lot line concerns that we've seen or heard from other communities, don't necessarily show up within 6 months. They come in down the road. So, whether that's 12 months, 18 months, 24 months down the road on some of the operating side. The point I would make there further is, in reality, that is 8 months or 12 months or 16 months or 24 months down the road before you will get that specific operational sort of feedback or metrics or what have you. So when I say operational, I would say, parking, snow removal stuff, waste bin placements, and all those things. And the last thing I'll add to Mr. Deputy Mayor is the other aspect that will have to be developed or see what other communities do along those lines is some kind of benchmarking to your general regular operations as well. You'd have to be able to take the information you're garnering specifically to a zero lot line side and also transpose that somewhat onto your overall snow removal, this, that, waste bin, this, that, and the other. So I'll stop there, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I think.
No, I appreciate the commentary there. I'll pass to Councillor Pletchko. Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Where to start, I'm not really sure, but I'd like to make a few comments. So glad to see that our developers want to develop within our community. I'm glad to see that they bring projects forward. However, I'm not sure that they heard council's conversation when we were talking about zero lot lines. So to see two at one time, I think, is really a bit perplexing. And the amount of phone calls that I've received from the people in the areas that have not been notified and stuff like that is a bit troubling for me when it comes to a new project that we're trying to do in our community. And I think council did a really good job when we talked about what we wanted to do within our community to try a small project. And, you know, I think that was a good faith project from everybody that sat at this table that day, that we would like to try something that's a little abnormal to the past of what previous councils have decided. So, again, I think that was really good. When I look at the two proposals, I see one with 39 units and one with 11. And I don't want to tie the two together, but somehow bringing them together like this at the same time, they've really tied them together, which has tied our hands a little bit for some of us to try and figure out what is the best place for a project to move forward. And I'm a bit concerned by that we have the two in front of us. However, thankful again that the developers see fit that it's time to move forward with our community. So we have to look at these really well. And really tonight is about not this portion of it. Tonight is just approving a first reading. First reading really gets our community involved. It gets them the opportunity to be able to have some good say of whether we move forward or whether we don't. And, you know, I see this council does a really good job at hearing what our community wants. And, you know, sometimes what our community wants is not always what the developer wants, which is really the way life goes sometimes, you know. And sometimes the community doesn't like what council makes for decisions. But tonight's not about all of that. Tonight is a simple thing that we just decide whether we move forward for community engagement. And I think that's what's important tonight is we need to move forward with that community engagement to see what the appetite is for this within our community. And we'll have the opportunity to hear our residents speak to projects like this within our community. As we've all listened to other communities that have had bad success with the zero lot lines. You know, when this come forward, I received a number of calls from out of the town asking what Stony was doing. So, you know, I think tonight what's important for me is that we move this first reading forward. It gives everybody that was here tonight that wanted to speak to it an opportunity to come speak in our chamber council, and it gives us a chance to really hear what's good for our community and what's not good for our community. So again, I want to thank our developer for bringing this project forward, and I guess we'll see where this goes after first reading, if it passes first reading. So that would be my only comment tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Pletchko. Any further? Oh, Councillor Hansard, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Well, I've had a lot of years sitting in one of these chairs, and I can remember one time in particular when first reading wasn't passed, and honestly, I had more feedback afterward about why. We never got to actually understand. We never actually got to speak to it, because what council thought we would be upset about wasn't what we were upset about. And that taught me a very, very good lesson. There's hardly ever a reason not to pass first reading, because that's the only trigger that gives the public and the developer a chance to come forward with what their desires are and their corrections and their thoughts. We might be surprised what some people have to say, in particular, given the temperature of the ability for younger families and downsizing families to buy a smaller place, because the real estate market is not looking really good right now for people because of the high interest rates and a number of other factors. Maybe this is an answer. And although I don't like to see land banking and sitting on land for a long period of time, it's good that this developer seems to have had some land that they could step up and put something together, this inkling that they got, that there was an opportunity here to do something different. So I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing this pass this evening so that we can hear from everybody and see what the full plan is. The other thing that I wanted to say is my idea of a pilot project is probably smaller than what we're looking at in this particular bylaw. But the most important thing that I wanted to ask, or maybe say and then ask, how can we go about letting it be known that as a pilot project, and I don't know if there is an official word for that in everything we've talked about and what the intent of council was when we agreed to move forward with this type of housing, that a pilot project needs a period of time, and I believe that's what the town manager was speaking to, so that we can actually get some feedback after the fact to see how do the people like living there. Do they bond? Do they create a really tight-knit community like they did in Brookview? Do they have trouble with normal things like the recycling and trash bins? Maybe part of that answer is that we would have the smaller trash bins available in the future so that they don't have such huge things to put in the way of cars getting in and out and parking. We have lots of answers for things that come forward as problems. We also are open to good ideas, and I'm hoping, though, that we have time to judge this, and that by approving the first reading and perhaps moving on to approve the whole project, we don't see every other developer in town with a piece of land rush in now to create another one of these before we can actually judge what is happening with these neighborhoods. Because unless we know those answers, while I'm sitting in a chair on this council, I won't be in a hurry to approve until we know what the feedback is going to be. So I guess that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Any other discussion or debate from council? Just a couple of final thoughts. I do appreciate the commentary around first reading and what that means, and putting things on the table and allowing residents who have an invested interest the opportunity to speak. And I think that's an important part of our process and a norm, that we have here in Stony Plain typically to move forward with our first readings. When I look at, this development specifically, but overall, the numbers came out, but I think we're looking at about 40 lots, that would fall under this zero lot line. And, at first when I saw the two come into council, was a little bit nervous about what that might mean in the number of lots that might be being discussed. But I feel like 40 probably gives us enough without too many. I think sometimes if the sample size is too small, the feedback that we receive can be skewed one way or the other as well. And so, I maybe don't share the same concern around the overall number, although the two proposals did throw me for a moment when we first received our package this evening. Do think it's important to note as well, and I think administration did a good job of speaking to this, but just for clarity, we have zero lot line regulations in our land use bylaw, but it is at the privy of council to approve areas for those developments. And so, we're speaking about two developments specifically here, and there's not kind of a broad sweep that this will affect, and has been commented, each proposal will come through council as we move forward here. With that, we've had the opportunity to review the proposed land use bylaw for South Creek Stage 5. We've had the opportunity to hear from administration and have our questions answered. And so the motion before us is to approve first reading and to authorize administration to move forward with scheduling a public hearing. And with that, we will call to question. All in favor? And that carries. All right, next on our agenda is 8.2, the first reading of the West Terra Stage 17 Land Use Bylaw Amendment, and we'll pass this back to administration. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, for all of council, this is the first reading for bylaw 2670 LUO 23. This is for West Terra Stage 17, and again, it's a bylaw amendment with two parts. One, the zero lot line map, and the other being the specific zones that are being applied for. So I'll just skim over this a little bit, given we've previously seen many of these slides. So again, land use planning framework. This is the land development stage. Similar to the previous one for South Creek, public engagement has taken place. There was letters sent to nearby property owners, proposals and shadow plans were provided, opportunities for feedback, and a summary report has been provided. Before you is the West Terra area structure plan. You can see most of the area is the yellow low density, and then a little area is the orange semi-detached townhouse area. You'll see here there's a small little area in the bottom left corner that shows a natural area as well as park and open space there. Specifically, the area of this application is in the red crosshatched area, just south of West Terra Drive, approximately south of where the playground, hockey rink, and larger playground or park space are. That's being just north of West Terra Drive. And then this is adjacent to West Terra Avenue there. In terms of the specific redistrictings, the majority of it is going from the FD to the R5, which again is the small lot mixed form residential district. Basically one road cuts off of West Terra Drive. So again, West Terra Drive is just on the north here. This would create a road right-of-way that would meander through, having lots on the east and west, and then would end here. Just for some context, there's an existing playground in the area labeled P1, approximately where the cursor is. Across from here, there's a little park trail area, and then it currently ends kind of through this, what's indicated as a P3. You'll notice there's a P1 that comes around and goes all the way up along with the proposed P3. The P3 is an area where there's a drainage ditch from the wetland just to the south of this area that would channelize any of that stormwater drainage that flows from Parkland County through our southern boundary into the wetland and then goes through sort of a bypass, which this channel here, the P3, would show, which is a utility district. And again, there's some park space along that, as well as the potential for a trail to link to the existing park spaces to both the east as well as, again, to the north, as mentioned previously on the slide. Again, the second component to this being the zero lot line area. As shown on the map here, there's a lighter green, almost a yellow here on the west side of the proposed road, which are the front drive zero lot line detached product. And on the east side of the road is proposed front detached, semi-detached, as denoted by slightly larger areas with a dotted line, noting where the zero lot line would be on a semi-detached. And on the west side, where there's a solid line and a dotted line, denoting where that easement would be for a zero lot line product. And again, similar to the previous bylaw, we are proposing for council to consider advertisement of the public hearing to be scheduled on February 27th, with the public hearing and second and third reading on the same date for council to make a decision on, if granted. I do notice a quick typo there. It should be 2023, just for clarity on the slide there before someone asks. Anyways, that's all I have for my presentation. So any questions or comments would be received by administration well. Thank you.
Thank you, administration. Members of council, similar to our last bylaw, we'll reserve questions for clarity and understanding on the presentation specifically, and reserve our discussion and debate for after the motion is passed. Councillor Pletchko.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, thank you to our developer for bringing this forward. I'm looking for some clarification as I read through this whole package. At one point in time, and I went back through, and I'm still not sure I'm convinced I read right what I was reading. Where this new subdivision is, and I'll refer to the drainage ditch that somebody's obviously built to drain water behind the people's places. You can see there, and they talk about flooding, but we also talked about, there was also talk about an area behind there for access that would have been a grassed area that would be available for access. Where in that was that part of this development? So then I'll take you one more step further, because so that drainage that's there, that is actually an access that somebody's put in there. That's not part of the drainage. And am I clear to understand that the new drainage will be moved over, so where your arrow is along that portion of it, so it actually will drain out of there properly, so there won't be the flooding area that they have there currently?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Pletchko, yes, as common in areas that are pre-development or soon-to-be developed areas, there's often some concerns with overland drainage. In this case, there does appear to be a area that was man-made, I guess, to control the water. Ultimately, again, it's a little bit faint to see here, but there's a little spillway over here. And then there's actually a pipe that goes through here, which is where this that currently pools in this corner here will eventually drain. This stage 17 does develop the area so that it can technically have an outlet directly from the wetland northward straight into that already created area further upstream, or sorry, downstream from the existing area where there are some of those concerns.
So that's going to clear up part of the problem of the flooding in the backyards that are along that aspect then, by having the drainage drained properly. And I just want to be real clear, because I've had lots of people ask me why we're diverting water with something that's a natural drainage. And I just want it to be very clear that this is not a natural drainage. This is a drainage that was put in to divert water from an area, but it's not an actual waterway.
That is correct. My understanding is the applicant has actually gone through the province to get Water Act approval for this sort of thing, which again is provincial legislation that would claim water bodies, stream courses, those sort of things. And again, this is something that has only been here probably since the development take place. As you know, pre-development changes the grades and the flow of water. So yes.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Councillor Hansard, go ahead.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I believe Councillor Pletchko was hitting on the same area that I was thinking about. I just want to clarify, a properly constructed drainage solution would provide better water removal from that area than what is currently there. That will benefit all the people who already have homes in that west part of that area on Westera Avenue. Is that correct? Will it solve some of their issues, or have we already solved it with a more not a professional reconstruction of drainage?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Hansard, thank you for the question. So to further the manager of planning's comments on the drainage, so the At this stage, it's important to understand, like, the way that the drainage is going to be proposed to be set up in here is to help ensure that the drainage for these lots that come online is properly serviced for that area. So as was noted and discussed a lot in the last few comments here, the there's intent to make better and utilize the area better for drainage. So those lots are properly serviced and not negatively impact the neighboring lots at all with this proposal. And some of the more detailed answers to these drainage questions can be found in the Stantec report that's actually in the package. It starts on page 118 of your package. And it does discuss the surface water from the development will be directed north via the stormwater pipes. And it does go into greater detail about how the overland flow would actually function. At this stage, we don't have all those details fleshed out. Those come with the detailed engineering review as we get further on into the process with these development proposals with the developer. They provide the overview of where and how they want to manage the stormwater for these lots, and we work towards making sure that those are going to comply at this early stage. So at the current stage, with the information that we have in the package, the proposal is meant to service the area and the surrounding areas as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Any other discussion or debate? Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question. You mentioned that this is a mix of detached and semi-detached on the zero lot line product. Can you maybe just remind us what's the required setback on the semi-detached? So for the zero lot line product on a semi-detached, you would have the shared property line, which would be a shared common wall of an actual structure. So what is the setback then on the other side of that lot?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie. Typically in Stony Plain, the setback for semi-detached is 1.2 meters. Previously it was more 1.5, but I think most of our districts are now at the 1.2. So typically between two buildings, you would have both of that. So you'd have 1.2 times 2, which would be 2.4 meters. Typically in a zero lot line, you're looking at usually 1.5. So there would be a difference of about 3 feet or about sorry, what am I doing here? 2.4 and 1.5, so 0.9, which would be about 3 feet.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Approximately 1 meter.
And then, if I may, thank you. I'm kind of hearing a lot in regards to the notification side, and again, you know, sort of look at the way the notifications happen for this one. You could question why wasn't this property notified versus this one, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I've seen in other municipalities, but I don't see occur in Stony Plain, is when there is a proposed land use bylaw amendment, there's actually signage in that area that gets erected, some temporary signage that notifies of public hearing dates. It would show the conceptual map and those type of things, where to go to get more information. Is that something that we've ever considered initiating? And if not, why not?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Laurie. Sign notification or general notification for bylaws there's been times in the past where there's certain requirements under provincial legislation that requires a notification or a sign to be posted on the site, specifically dealing with MR or ER changes often require that. I know Park West Crossing, for example, when they were doing an MR swap, they required notification as per provincial legislation. In terms of municipalities being able to do notification via posted signage at the site, it is an opportunity or an option that could be presented. I know some of the changes with the MGA allowing different forms of notification, or specifically a notification bylaw, is something that has been talked about internally. But again, it's something that I think we're kind of working through to determine what the best options are. I know internally in the planning development area, we've recently kind of hatched out some stuff so that there is the opportunity to put a signage on the site. It is something that in some cases we have required them to do, and going forward, it is definitely something we are considering.
Excellent, thank you. Further on, if I may, So interesting in the feedback, it was great again to see all the survey responses that we did, and it highlighted, and I'm sure the developers noticed significantly, it highlighted more of the environmental reserve and wetland concerns more than anything. So I'm hoping that that feedback is heard loud and clear, and that when the presentation comes for second reading, that we do get a very thorough presentation on that, on the impacts, on the remediation, on how that's all going to work. I do have a question, though, of administration. So both the previous bylaw, the first reading that was passed, and this one are both tentatively scheduled for public hearing for February 27th. Both of these have a potential for what I would call a large public engagement. I'm wondering if there was consideration by administration to have these two public hearings and therefore also second and third readings on different dates in order to ensure that there was adequate time and capacity for appropriate discussion, debate, and decision on these items.
Again, thanks for the question on there. So what I would, I guess my comment, we often will try to schedule, whether it's public hearings or whether it's agenda items, to essentially manage the time required. How long will council be sitting in those chairs through an evening, so on, and how does that look? So we do actively try to manage the time frame. One of the other sides of a development proposal is the timeliness of moving it through the process as well. And again, I think the notion was to try to balance that out. I don't know, I don't have in front of me what else is scheduled for the 27th. We would probably look to manage the agenda item, business item sides of that, if at all possible as well. So that's where we would be at on that. So if the question, was that considered? Yes. We do consider that. But at this point, do not look to reschedule from the 27th to March of whatever date or what have you. So I'll stop there. Thought about yes, changed no.
So just further to that then, through the Deputy Mayor, because there are two public hearings, if we start the first public hearing and that public hearing takes several hours and we are into, the 9, 10 o'clock before that public hearing itself is even closed, at what point in time would we then look at deferring, or can you even defer a public hearing? If you have called a public hearing for the 27th, we have the first public hearing and that public hearing takes such a time that, we know that, I think it's once council meetings hit, I can't remember, I think it's 4 hours or 5 hours, we have to pass a motion for those to continue further. At what point in time, or can we defer that? Can we take that and can we make a motion then to move that public hearing to a later date?
You're certainly, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you. I'll try a couple quick answers there. So yes, you can adjourn a public hearing and defer it to another date and time. If you get to a point where you don't even start, I'm not sure what the procedure would be exactly there, but ultimately you would have to, I'm sure, reset and re-advertise. That would be, I would think, would be the minimum you would have to do. Is there anything further our legislative side may want to add to that?
So, and that kind of raises part of my concern, is that, we have two potentially relatively large public hearings. If we don't get to the second one, and that then is required to be rescheduled, which requires re-notification through the same periods, it likely has the same timeline tied to it. Whereas if these were split between two consecutive RCMs, regular council meetings, we likely wouldn't have that potential, because if we get to that delay is likely going to extend further than the next one, possibly two regular council meetings after the 27th of February, which would then delay the process even further. So, I completely understand where administration is coming from, and I'm, looking at a hypothetical situation, but it's something that in that consideration, I think, maybe for the future should be looked at, putting two public hearings in one council meeting that potentially would result in one of those public hearings being delayed. That delay that happens at that council meeting may be longer than if it was just scheduled for the next following council meeting. So I don't know that there's any other comment required for that. I'm not looking to move this public hearing. I think administration has done their due diligence, and I trust that they'll manage the remainder of the agenda to limit any possibility of that occurring. That's all for me, Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie, and I certainly appreciate the question and the comments as well from administration around managing that agenda to limit as much as possible that possibility. So thank you for that. Councillor Hansard, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. A thought occurs to me as Councillor Laurie is speaking. I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, once you have the first reading scheduled, I think there's a timeline that everything follows. I'm not aware of being able to extend a public hearing 5 weeks or 4 weeks when you generally follow a certain amount of time from when the first reading happens to second reading, the public hearing, et cetera. There's a flow of events that's sort of governed. If I'm wrong, please correct me, because I don't believe that once you start this tonight, that you can actually postpone to another night a public hearing. There have been many cases when we've had more than one public hearing in a night. A great deal of how that goes is the chair managing the meeting where people speak, and certainly we want to hear from everybody that wants to speak, but managing that people don't go over time by great amount, and also where if people are just repeating the same thing, perhaps there could be some organization within their groupings where one person might speak for 3 or 4 or speak to an issue, and that way we don't have just repeated comments. I'm just not sure. Could you get an answer?
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate the question, Councillor Hansard, and for what we're talking about specifically today, I don't believe Councillor Laurie has asked for that to be moved. It was just the commentary around what that day may entail. So certainly something that I think administration could, answer for us in an email, but not something I think we need answers to here this evening, because it won't affect the process moving forward for these particular
So he
bylaws.
clarified that to you.
No, he clarified that to the
Okay.
gallery. Yep, absolutely. All right. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? All right. With that, Councillor Palechko.
Just one more question, Deputy Mayor, please, and thank you. So when we talk zero lot lines and we talk front access, of the portion of the lot that's there, what portion of that is still got green grass attached to it, and what portion of that actually is fully developed with concrete or parking stalls?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Palechko, I would have to do some calculations and I could bring that back for the public hearing, but I don't have that information handy. Again, it would depend if it's a double car garage, a single car garage, few other factors in terms of are they just meeting the minimum setbacks, are they exceeding those? That would all play a factor or a role in determining that.
Okay, I would be happy with that in an email just sent out to council letting us know what portion of this development here will have green space and or full concrete all over it.
All right. Thank you to council for the questions. Thank you to administration for your clarity. With that, I'm going to look to Councillor Meyer for the motion here, please.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that Town Council give first reading to Bylaw 2670 LUO 23 to amend Land Use Bylaw 2654 LUO 22 and authorize administration to proceed with newspaper advertising and notification of a public hearing to be held on February 27th, 2023 for Bylaw 2670 LUO 23.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. We'll open it up to council for debate and discussion. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you. So where to begin, kind of. So this evening, I've heard a number of my fellow councillors describe concerns regarding the wetlands and the drainage, which I appreciate. The developer has already kind of elicited some of those concerns from the neighborhood. This reminds me of campaigning in the area, as well as having been toured by a citizen of the area regarding sort of some of these concerns. So, not being an engineer and just reading these plans myself, you're left kind of trying to figure things out for yourself. So what I would like to just echo is my fellow Councillor Laurie's comments regarding having a very thorough explanation of the drainage plans for this area, because this evening, one of my questions was going to be to administration of how confident they were in the plans, but having listened, I heard some of these drainage plans have not yet been fully fudged out. And so I would like to just express some reservations there. That doesn't make me feel particularly confident that we are going to have a very well planned out drainage issues. I'd like to specifically highlight on page 74, I believe, it discusses a swale that will direct water laterally, one north and one south, to a mid-block walkway. And I'd just like to highlight to administration that with these changing weather patterns that we've been seeing, more frequent freeze thaws, the potential danger that if we are using a walkway as a drainage area, it's very likely we'll see that walkway iced up from time to time. And also listening to the presentation this evening, it was highlighted how this walkway is actually quite key to tying together a number of green spaces in the neighborhood. So just back to my original request, a very thorough explanation I would like to see at our presentation at the public hearing in regards to drainage for the area.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Councillor Hansard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Well, one of the things that I thought about through the whole time I read the package, and thank the administration and developer for providing good information for us to be able to look at this. When this whole idea was brought forward to council to begin with, the zero lot line, it was not a slam dunk decision. It was something that we contemplated, and lots of people had different ideas on council about what this would look like, how it would fit in our town, and who would benefit and who would maybe not benefit or feel that they did not benefit. So it wasn't even a real easy decision to get to this. But what's good about coming to passing a first reading on development is that we realize we still have people in the development world who are interested in helping us grow our town, and that we have residents who care about not just their neighborhood, but the whole town, because they realize what works well for them also makes the rest of Stony Plain better and shines the way for potential for future development in other areas of town. So we want all of these things to work well, and we want everyone to come away from the developer right down to each resident to feel that they've been heard and that the best consideration council has to bring to the table has been brought to the table when these subjects come forward. I'm looking forward to hearing what the public has to say, what the developer will actually say to us here in council chambers will be forever recorded, and some councilors have elephant memory. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be able to speculate on something new, and unless the wisdom of council, things that have been said by administration and what I've read in my council package persuades me ultimately otherwise, I'm leaning in the direction of wanting to see first reading passed, and I encourage my fellow councilors to do the same.
Any further discussion and debate? Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to say, I know there was a couple of comments made this evening about the two applications in front of us and the sample sizes, and actually, I'd like to just express my support on the way that this has come forward, although, having two at once is certainly maybe not something that we necessarily expected. Both of them on a scale are quite small. There's 29 lots in one and 31 in the other for 60, and that's just the 0 lot line lots. That's not including the lots of the one application that were not 0 lot line lots. What I like about that is rather than having one plan of 60 lots, we get 2 small sections within 2 different areas of town that give us an opportunity to, as I think it was Councillor Hansard said, evaluate. And I think that's a very important part of this. A very important part coming out of this has to be the understanding of what does the evaluation of the 0 lot line potential look like. How long do we give that? Is it based off of the approval of the land use bylaw amendment? How are we judging that? Who are we judging that from? Are we judging it from the people who live in those areas? Are we judging it from town-wide? Are we judging it by the people who buy those homes? Or are we judging it by the people who live across from them? I'm not sure whether administration would be able to prepare something in time for those public hearings, but I would like to hear from administration during that time how we do plan on evaluating the success or the non-success of these potential pilot projects if they are approved going forward, because I think that is a very important piece when it goes to second and third reading of actually potentially approving these. I would find it very hard to approve these to move forward if we do not have an understanding as to how this gets evaluated. And so, I hope that rings loud and clear. I'm encouraged by the fact that for the one, we did not have essentially any response that was in regards to the 0 lot line concept of it. And then in regards to the one we're speaking of now, West Terra, of the responses that were received to the surveys, there was some mention of it, but in comparison to some of the other issues that have been raised, there wasn't a lot. So, Councillor Meyer alluded to it, I've said it again, and I'll echo it again, that the environmental reserve portion of this and how that's being managed, I think, is very important, because although this is a land use bylaw amendment for just a small section of West Terra, forgive me, I don't have the exact page in front of me, but there was a great map that actually showed what the phase to the west would look like as well, and what the potential impacts were there. And so I think this will be a great precursor as it'll lead into that into the future to understand what the entirety of the impact on that area will be for the finalization of that southwest corner of West Terra. Again, I think that feedback's been heard loud and clear from both our administration and developer, and I trust that when this comes back to us on February 27th, we will see the type of information that we're looking for in that. And I'm fully supportive of first reading on this, as was on the other one, in order to get that information presented to council and to the public for us to make appropriate decisions at that time.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Just a point of clarity, maybe. I'm going to look to administration for this. Just listening to some numbers, I wanted to make sure my numbers weren't off. I had 11 lots proposed as 0 lot line in West Terra out of a proposed total 31. Could administration just clarify for us, are all 31 lots proposed to be 0 lot line? So I'm looking page 51, the paragraph above the master plan document list.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, there's a total of 31 lots, of which 20 are semi-detached and 11 are the front drive 0 lot line detached.
Okay, so between the two, we're looking at 11 in West Terra, 29 in South Creeks for a total of 40 lots. Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Pletchko, go ahead. Or is it?
That's where I was headed. I just wanted clarification, because when I read it, it was 40 lots, 11 in one and 29 in the other, so.
Thank you.
Just 100% clarity, then I'm sorry, that might have been my misunderstanding as I was reading through the information, because there was a lot of it. So the R5 front drive semi-detached in the West Terra portion, those are not zero lot line, semi-detached. Those are just simply regular semi-detached under our R5.
Correct.
Okay, so those back onto all of the homes on West Terra Avenue then?
Those that are part of the boundary of stage 17, yes.
Okay, so then the zero lot line lots in stage 17 that we are contemplating here under this reading are simply the lots on the, I guess that would be the west portion that currently have no other development surrounding them.
That is correct.
Excellent, thank you for that clarity. My apologies on the confusion I caused there.
Not at all. Thank you for that. Any other discussion and debate from council? All right, just a couple of thoughts. I certainly appreciate the commentary that's come forward from council on both of these bylaws around public engagement, ensuring our residents are well aware of the proposals in their neighborhoods and in our community. I also certainly appreciate the commentary on the environmental reserve as well. And when we look at the surveys that were completed, you know, there were, I think, 28 is the number that comes to mind there, and certainly appreciate the consideration that's been given and the request for more information coming back for that public hearing and second and third reading. So, you know, some good information here before us, certainly some things that council would like more information on, and I trust that that clarity will come as we move forward in this process. Similar to 8.1 with South Creek as a first reading, typically our process is to move this forward to allow more of a robust opportunity for public engagement. And so that will be my vote here this evening. So with that, we've had the opportunity as council to review, the proposed land use bylaw amendment for West Terrace Stage 17. We've had the opportunity to hear from council and have our questions answered here this evening. We have a motion before us to approve first reading of the bylaw amendment and to direct administration to move forward with the public hearing. With that, I will call to question. All in favor? And that carries. And there, we're about 90 minutes in. I'm going to call a 10-minute recess. Back. Just a 10-minute recess. We're going to carry on with our agenda this evening. We are moving on to item 9.1. This is our Dimension Connections project update. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good evening, Council. We're very pleased to share this evaluation summary report of the Dementia Connection work that's been going on in the region for the last several years. This project was born out of an idea that came through our Dementia Collaborative, and that Dementia Collaborative work allowed us to see that there were needs in the community related to increased social participation and providing respite opportunities for people living with dementia and their care partners. And so from that, we applied for funding and received funding towards this project. I will turn things over to our Community Development Officer, Deanna Butts, to share the results of the project and give a little bit of background information. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Hi there. Thank you, Lisa. So I'd like to share with you the work that we have completed to make our community more dementia-friendly. The Dementia Connection project was funded from Alberta Health Services under the Community-Based Innovations for Dementia Care grant, and we've completed the final evaluation phase. Dementia-friendly communities work has been a focus in our region for several years now, as Lisa mentioned. Phase 1 of becoming more dementia-friendly started in 2017. The work included increasing awareness and identifying challenges people living with dementia face. Some of those identified challenges included accessible recreational and social opportunities, access to respite services, and transportation. So finding solutions to these challenges has guided our work as we entered into Phase 2 and launched the Dementia Connections project in 2020. Dementia Connection was meant to be a catalyst for inclusion by engaging a team of volunteers to be active champions that are sharing information and resources. They would walk with people living with dementia and their care partners on their journey. The Dementia Connections project was developed and implemented with several focus areas. These include offering individual supports, offering community-based dementia-friendly activities, building connections and social opportunities, building capacity in our region, along with shifting perspectives and increasing awareness. These areas of focus have guided us as we work to build a resilient and safe community for all. A large focus has been to recruit, train, and support volunteers. These volunteers have been very passionate and are now champions in our community. They are knowledgeable about dementia and are familiar with local resources. With regular evaluation criteria built into our programs and services, we've been able to get creative in offering community-based, dementia-friendly social activities. Using this person-centered approach has been appreciated by residents and care partners. It has been commented on by other regions across the province that it seems that we have a very resource-rich community. And it is noticed that we have a strong, dedicated group that is committed to advancing Stony Plain to becoming more dementia-friendly. So some of the creative social connection activities that have been popular include creating connections through art, the Friendly Visiting, Memory Cafe, Trail Explorers, and History Explorers. What is unique about these activities is that they offer a form of informal respite for the care partners. These types of activities give the care partner a chance to talk to others who are in a similar caregiving situation. When we talk about shifting perspectives and increasing awareness, this includes recognizing Alzheimer's Awareness Month and offering educational learning sessions like Living the Dementia Journey and Let's Talk Dementia. In terms of offering individual supports, volunteers and the Community Connector for Older Adults provides assistance with dementia service navigation. So who have we reached? Our project activities ran from August 2020 to August 2022. During this time, we are happy to report that we've been able to recruit and train 14 committed community volunteers. The original goal from the project was to reach 15 volunteers, so we came pretty close. As you can see, we've been able to connect with 279 people living with dementia and their care partners to provide information and resources. So we reached significantly more people than we intended with this goal. The original goal was to reach 150, so that's a pretty significant increase. And then in terms of people in our programs, from the original goal was 50, and we managed to have 102 participants in our planned activities. Another measurable objective was to have participants from all 3 regions, and this goal was met. So we had participants from Stony, Spruce, and Parkland. It can be said that our actual number of trained volunteers is much larger. There are many informal volunteers in the region who have taken our Senior Connect bystander training, which does include modules on dementia. This project also inspired others to help support people living with dementia. One example of this is Memory Cafe. This dedicated group from the Stony Plain United Church wanted to help people living with dementia, and they ran the Memory Cafe with backbone support from our department. This was an example of the project's ability to build capacity in our community. Given the many challenges of the past couple of years, we have been able to adapt and continue to provide support to the community. Looking back on what we've achieved, we're proud of the supports we've offered and the connections built throughout our region. We also know we can reach more people and hope to grow the program over time. So throughout the project, evaluations has been a major focus. We did a midterm evaluation in August of 2021, and now the final evaluation. And for this final evaluation, an independent consultant from McCaffrey Consulting was engaged, and here are some of the evaluation highlights. We asked volunteers, care partners, and service organization members to describe their experience with the project. We did this through a combination of online surveys, telephone interviews, and in-person reflections. Volunteers said that their experience met or exceeded their expectations. 100% of volunteer respondents agreed that as a result of volunteering for this project, they are now more involved in other community events or activities, and that they are more knowledgeable now about dementia. The majority of respondents also agreed that they now feel like they can make a difference in their community. Care partners of people living with dementia said that overall they appreciated the activities and supports. It felt good to know that their loved one was in the company of people who cared and understood the complexities of living with dementia. Because we all love data and surveys, it is interesting to note. When we asked how did they hear about the project, majority of responses indicated word of mouth or our Town of Stony Plain website. I always find that interesting. The community report with this evaluation has been shared and will be posted on our website for additional information. The Dementia Connections project has been successful at supporting new relationships, learning about what is important to people living with dementia, adapting throughout the pandemic, and providing a variety of activity choices. Care partners learned about available supports, people living with dementia were included in activities, and volunteers became more involved in their community. The Westview Dementia Collaborative has proven to be a success. This group was established in the first phase, and it can be seen that this working group is vital to support the development of partnerships between community and the health sector. By working collaboratively, great strides have been made in building capacity in our region with this group, as they've been able to share information, resources, and advocating for systems change. This interagency working group has reduced barriers and really listened to people's experiences with the goal in mind of improving service delivery across multi-sector organizations. These leaders in the community and serving agencies have elevated community-based innovations for dementia care. Some examples of key success components, as identified by the evaluation participants, include building relationships, the one-to-one connection, feeling heard, learning what is important, and activities that reduced isolation. So let's talk about some of the challenges. Key challenges included recruitment, fluctuating attendance, and navigating the pandemic. In some cases, care partners described feeling overwhelmed and said that nothing from our project's perspective or from the work we were doing really could have improved their situation. Recruiting participants was a very difficult challenge, again, given the complexities of living with dementia. And we also note that it was a challenge and continues to be a challenge to get the word out regarding options of activities. But we are dedicated to continuing to offer supports, and with this consistency, we know that word of mouth will continue to grow the program. We will apply what we've learned about successes and challenges as we continue to develop. So from what we've heard, the three main themes emerged. These include awareness, acceptance, and accessibility. These have been noted as continued focus areas. We will continue to find strategies and opportunities to promote awareness, which will then increase acceptance. We will continue to assess barriers and increase accessibility of offered activities and supports. We have an ongoing list of potential activities, and the evaluation process also provided several other creative ideas. So just a few acknowledgements I'd like to include. Alberta Health Services and the Community-Based Innovations for Dementia Care Grant, along with the Connecting People and Community for Living Well team. I would like to thank our regional partners on the Westview Dementia Collaborative, our dedicated volunteers, and the people living with dementia and their care partners. By working collaboratively, the goal has been and will continue to be to create and maintain an inclusive and welcoming dementia-friendly environment within the Tri-Region. From what we've heard and have seen demonstrated, the Dementia Connection Project provides a sense of hope. It helps people to feel heard, supported, and connected. It's a multi-layered program that meets multiple overlapping needs, including physical activity, social connection, access to resources, support, and information. Thanks for your time tonight to share this update, and I'd welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I find that I often, sit up here feeling such a sense of pride about the work that happens in our community, and something like this has very little to do with us, but just so exciting to know we have staff that champion initiatives like the Dementia Connections Project in our community, and it's exciting to see the results from that. So thank you for that. We'll open it up to questions for clarity and understanding from Council. Councillor Hansard.
Hello. Sorry, no, I don't need to say hello to you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I appreciate very much the opportunity through you to ask a couple of things. You mentioned that you were surprised in one area by the quite a bit larger number than you anticipated. Do you anticipate a next step on this? Or because this was a project, does it actually come to an end, or does it become something else?
Yes, thank you. Deputy Mayor, through to Council. Yes, we did build sustainability into the project. That was one of our goals. So we did spend quite a bit of time at the beginning, really establishing a framework, developing that, clear volunteer intake process, guidelines, procedures. So the framework has been built. So yes, we will plan, we do plan to continue on. We'll keep modifying and adapting as the community indicates, the level of programs that they need.
Okay, and a second question, if I may. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The dementia is sadly a very large problem that is coming into people's lives, and it is something that is almost overwhelming. I know through a few people that I'm associated with who are going through a tremendous grief. It's like having someone die, but the person isn't dead. They continue with their life, and there's still a huge sense of loss. When you're working with the caregivers, is there a way that you're actually not just helping them to be better for their loved one who has dementia, but is there a way for you to actually help them with the grief and the being overwhelmed and the amount of work that is involved and keeping themselves sane? That's a question that comes to mind because I so often see seniors who are caregivers for other seniors whose health and mental stability deteriorate badly because they're so busy looking after the person who's been stricken with this disease that they don't look after themselves. Can you tell us a little bit in a more personal way what you're able to do to help those caregivers?
Sure. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through to all council. Yes, for sure, Councillor Hansard. We do offer right now the caregiver support group, and that is facilitated from the Alzheimer's Society. And they have several modules that they work through with each group, and a lot of it is supporting the caregiver. We have found too, through other programs that we've offered, like Care for the Caregiver, Compass, there's a lot of that peer support. And so even just having that opportunity for them to come together in that supportive environment, like a support group, they really benefit just from making those connections and chatting with someone else, who's in a similar situation. But there is, yes, we do have many resources. We have the support from Caregivers Alberta, who help, again, they have modules, they have a social worker that they have access to on a regular basis, so people can phone in. There's been a lot of advancements, I feel, in the last few years for sure, to help support caregivers. So that would be a couple off the top of my head would be the support group plus Caregivers Alberta.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation this evening. One important part is you mentioned about these programs continuing. So as we heard in the presentation, we had AHS funding that was used for the first 2 years to help kind of develop this, get these programs off the ground and going. So are there any other funding opportunities that are being explored for the continuation of this program? Or at this point in time, now that it has been kind of stood up and developed, does this sort of roll into our typical programming that is funded through the town of Stony Plain?
Deputy Mayor, through you to Councillor Laurie and the rest of council. At this point, we're not exploring additional funding. We will certainly keep our eyes open. As Deanna mentioned, the intent at the outset of the project was that we build sustainability in. And so we very clearly put plans in place to allow this to become part of our regular operations. If I'm speaking frankly, probably many of the activities were being done already, but without the dementia-friendly focus that we've now adjusted and adapted them to include. All told, the activity costs are quite minimal for the project. So something like an art program, it's usually under about $300 to run a session of that. So those types of programs, they really benefit the person with dementia and the care partner at a fairly low cost. What we do see by working in partnership with community is that we've streamlined referral processes, we've streamlined information sharing, and through the work that we've done in partnership with Westview Primary Care Network, we've got a very robust connection to physicians' offices, social worker networks, and other ways that we can help to smooth the dementia journey for people.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any, Councillor Palechko? Didn't even get the question out. It's all yours.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Always a delight to hear from our FCSS office in projects that you're always working on, and Your involvement in the community is astronomical, and I commend you for what work you do within that department. It's nice to hear that programs don't always cost money, but it's also nice to hear that you found a program that works within our community. And I think that's what's key. Not necessarily do we need funding for everything. Funding is nice, and maybe now is a good time for us to hit up both the two parties that are running that'll possibly form next government. You never know what we can get from them, but I don't know that always it's about money. And especially when it comes to something like this, I think it's having the ability to have something within our community that can support that. And I think you've done a great job at defining where you can continue this. And I look forward to seeing more of this within our community. So congrats.
Thank you, Councillor Plechko. Just looking to see any other questions or comments. No. Let's take the motion here. We'll start with the motion and then some final thoughts. Councillor Plechko, please.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Town Council accept the Dementia Connections project update.
Before I call the question, any further discussion from council? Thank you. Hearing none, really want to thank our GM of Community and Social Development, the CSD team, the many partners that were spoken to this evening for their work on this project. As a municipality, we value diversity and inclusion. It's just at the core of everything that we do. And I think we all share the belief that each and every resident enriches and brings value to our community. And if that sounds familiar, that's straight off the CSD website, but something that certainly hits home for me as well. This project has brought increased understanding and awareness to our community. It's created social connections and support for those living with dementia and their care partners. And I have full confidence that even though the grant is ended, that great work that's begun will continue and have a lasting impact on our community. And so thank you for all that you've done to get this project off the ground. With that, the motion on the table is that we accept the Dementia Connections project update for information, and I'll call to question. All in favor? And that carries. Next on our agenda, 9.2, this is our Public Works Building Update. Administration, go ahead with your presentation, please.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. I'm very excited to present an update on the Public Works Building project for Council tonight. This project has been building momentum for some time over the past few years in corporate plans. And tonight, Council will get an update on the progress and proposed options for its phasing. Tonight's presentation asks Council to approve administration to move to final design of the Public Works Building. This will allow administration to get all final documents completed and finalize expected construction costs for each phase. This information will be brought back to Council in the near future for any further decision to move to tender and construction phases and consider any financial impacts at that time. The town's manager of Parks and Leisure, Regina Lomberg, is here tonight to present all the updates. She'll give a short presentation and welcome any comments from Council at the end.
Thank you, Brett. Deputy Mayor and through to all of Council. As Brett noted, I'm here this evening to present an update of the Public Works Facility and Site Redevelopment Project. Apparently I can't have paper on your screen. The presentation this evening will include the background, some progress timelines, touch on master planning, sustainability, design, and a phasing plan along with next steps. The Public Works site in its existence was developed in the mid-70s. That's the overview of the current site. It has since grown and evolved to include two primary buildings, the existing Public Works main building, which houses the administrative offices, mechanics bay, woodworking shop, and staff lunchroom. And the annex to your right there, to the east, which houses the operations offices, a training room, utilities laydown area, and an open equipment and facility storage. Equipment and facility storage sheds and bulk material storage are located throughout the yard, and the Rotary Recycling Center is incorporated on the east side of the site, as you see there, adjacent to Brown Street. So administration has been working on a plan and design for a proposed public works building and site redevelopment since 2016, when funds were allocated through the corporate plan process. Preliminary design for a new standalone building and site redevelopment was initiated in 2017, and a public works building project plan developed in 2019. In 2020, Vauchel Architecture was engaged to complete a needs assessment, condition assessment, and preliminary planning for both building and yard space needs. The final needs assessment report was presented to Council in late 2020 and approved to progress to detailed design through, again, the corporate plan process. The project was then tendered and awarded to BR2 Architecture in 2021, and the detailed design and proposed phasing plan is being presented to you this evening. Master planning. A conceptual site plan was developed to maximize land use and prioritize site circulation. So you see the full plan of the site that's being proposed. Administration expressed a strong desire for proposed buildings to reflect Stony Plain heritage and history, and committed to user input in building design and layout. So there was a lot of staff workshops, engaging our staff on the operations team to provide their input into the design. Opportunities for phased development were a huge priority. Proposed new buildings are designed to accommodate solar panels. They include energy efficient equipment, LED lighting, and capacity for vehicle charging stations, because that day is coming. The proposed new administration building, fairly simple. Inspiration for the proposed administration building was derived from the local heritage and influence of the railway. Similar to the railway on the town specifically, speaks to the architectural style of other town facilities already existing, such as the town office, Heritage Park, and the golf course, or the maintenance building of the golf course. The proposed administration building, there's a site layout before you, features a staff hub comprised of a dedicated locker room, training, laundry and meeting space, and a lunchroom complete with an outdoor patio. The proposed building also houses a reception area with a meeting room and workstations for 2 administrative support, 2 closed manager's office. Currently, we have 2 managers on the operations team, being the infrastructure assets manager and myself, Parks and Leisure Services manager. There's a reconfigurable open office space to accommodate the 3 current supervisors, with room to expand that space, as you can see there. And the expanded and secure storage space to allow the town archives to be relocated from Forest Green Plaza. That is, just as a note, an expanded space from what they currently have at Forest Green. The existing Public Works main building would be renovated to provide in green the open office and workspace for parks and horticulture teams relocated from the annex. In the pink areas, a dedicated projects woodworking bay with expanded storage, tool room, and office space. In brown, a common training room and additional washrooms. And the mechanics bay in blue remains in its current location with added dedicated office space and parts room. So for those who are unaware, our mechanics basically have a desk in a parts room at this point, so just giving them a little bit more space. The proposed vehicle and equipment storage is split into 2 garages to provide better site drainage and can be phased based on priority and budget. An interior wash bay is incorporated, and both cold and heated storage is provided. The annex building renovation includes upgraded mechanical and electrical systems and is designed to provide dedicated laydown and office spaces. Gray for roads, it's actually purple on there, but it's kind of gray. Blue for facility assets, gold for utilities, with brown being common areas, and then you see one unassigned bay that could be used for either equipment storage or expansion space for laydown for one of the groups. So we tasked BR2 to develop a phasing plan with options to combine phases dependent on available budgets and considering dependencies. The recommended phasing plan, phase 1, shown in green. So we asked them to outline the site work that would be required for each of the phases too. That's why the map there is color-coded. Phase 1, so shown in green, the proposed new admin building with all related site work at an estimated cost of $4.2 million. Phase 2, shown in blue, would be the renovation and upgrades to the existing Public Works main building at an estimated cost of $1.2 million. Phase 3, shown in pink, and note that this can be broken into 3.1 and 3.2. So that's the construction of the equipment storage garages and all related site work, split as you can see there to $3.5 million for phase 1 or 3.1 and $2.7 million for 3.2. Phase 4, shown in yellow, would be the interior upgrades to the existing annex and remaining site work at an estimated cost of $2 million. Next steps, pending council direction this evening, would be to confirm the scope of work and budget for phase 1, and then to prepare tender documents and set a schedule for tender and construction. That is everything for the presentation, and I welcome your questions as long as they're not difficult.
Awesome. Thank you for the presentation this evening. I know this is, as we saw, 2016, 2017, I think, the beginning of the discussion. So exciting to see how far this has come. We'll open up to council for questions related to clarity and understanding on the presentation. And then after the motion, we'll open it up for discussion and debate. Starting with Councillor Palechko, please.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Sorry, I wanted to call you Councillor, but tonight you're Deputy Mayor. Muchly appreciated, and a great job, by the way, chairing tonight.
I appreciate that.
So I want to start off with a couple of things. I am so excited to see this come forward. I don't know how many else are here, but I can tell you this is well long in the coming for that department. And I want to start off with a couple of questions. The first question is, in 1970s, how many employees did we have?
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Palechko and all of council, I have no idea.
So
I should know that, and I can follow up.
I'm going to
and
suspect it was probably not a lot.
Less than we have today.
But what have we got today?
We currently have, jeepers. There are, I can break it down into groups for you. That might be easier for me, and you can add them up as I go. In the roads department, there are a group of 5, a foreman and 4 operators. In the fleet, we have 2 mechanics. In utilities, a foreman and 4 operators. 4 operators. In the facility assets, a foreman plus 2 operators. In the projects and event support, a foreman and 2 operators. Parks, a foreman and 4 operators. Hort, a foreman plus 1 operator, and who did I miss? I missed somebody. Oh, the projects and event crew are a foreman and 2 operators, plus 1 administrative assistant, 2 managers, and 3 supervisors. I think that's 51? 41, 51?
I think I lost it at about 41 is where it was.
I think.
And then
our seasonal staff in the summer, because that'll be your next question. In the summer, we add 8, 10, 17. We add about 23 in the summer,
so we
on average.
So we grow from probably a handful when we started in the 70s to close to 80 employees now. And we operate out of the same building that we did back in the 70s. So phenomenal job to your staff, and phenomenal that they are able to keep everything together. I know when I first took a tour of that building, when I first got on council, one of my concerns was the conditions that they had to function in. So again, very excited to see this coming forward. And unless the wisdom of council tells me different, this is something that we truly need to support going forward. I'm glad to see it come in a phased approach. We're always cognizant of what our residents need to support. But at the same time, I have a bit of a reservation. And the reason for that is this is something that when I hear people talk about services we need in our community, they talk about our Public Works Department not being able to do the job that they need to do, which always disappoints me because I think you guys do a phenomenal job down there. But if anybody took a tour from the town to see what conditions you worked in, they would know why you struggle a little bit from time to time to get people in and out of that place. You struggle with the lunch breaks, making sure everybody works. And the few washroom facilities, I noticed in your presentation, when you talked about more washrooms, it was the biggest smile you had on your face. So having come from there, I'm very appreciative of what I see in front of us. So again, very excited to see the phased-in approach, and it's something that you guys truly need. It also gives us the opportunity to plan and budget for being able to get a proper facility for the Public Works Department. So kudos to your team for coming up with a way to make it attractive enough for council to support. So I'm hoping tonight that we can get full council support on that. Thank you.
Councillor Hansard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Well, Councillor Palechko's not the only one that's excited, but I was also very excited last week at strategic planning, at how this item bubbled to the top in level of importance to all of council. And that's really important. I'll speak in the council discussion a little bit about the strategic planning, which I think is very important in a council's life. But to see this project is really an answer to a lot of prayers, mine included, over the years. I've been amazed and appalled at how well things can function in the space that you currently operate in. And I just look forward to how this will serve our employees better, but also our town better, so that residents can be really proud of the facility that hopefully you'll be provided with to be able to carry on the great work. It only takes an idea and a spark to make things happen. Sometimes it takes passage of time and budget to bring it to fruition. But again, unless wisdom of council now, because there is no other viewpoint to be heard, we said it all last weekend, persuades me otherwise, I'm leaning in the direction of supporting this. And I'll smile as well.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, and thank you for the presentation on this too. It's one that I think we've been waiting for very patiently for a very long time. Pat, probably all the way back to the time you first got on council, this has been something that was on the radar, so a long time coming. Being at that and talking about the fact that this is the same location we have been in since the mid-70s, I do have some questions in regards to what we've seen today, and some of them center around the future forward-looking on it. And so the first question I have is just, in looking at this facility design, it looks fantastic. And you did point out a few areas that were identified for future growth, but to me it just didn't seem like a lot. And so I'm kind of curious if you can tell us, based on this redesign, once it's fully built out, all phases are fully built out, how long will this redesigned Public Works facility essentially be suitable? How long will it meet our needs? To what size or population of the municipality, and how much growth in our employment base?
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councilor Laurie, just to clarify, it's with all phases or just with an individual phase put in?
With all phases.
With all phases.
So in the full build out of what we're seeing in front of us today, how long does that take us? The current facility has taken us, 50 years basically. Seeing what we're seeing today, are we looking at another 50 years? Are we looking at, our strategic plan talks about 30,000. Are we looking that, this will take us to 30,000 but no further beyond? Where does this put us in that perspective?
Through your Deputy Mayor to Councilor Laurie, I'll add some comments and see if the Manager of Parks and Leisure wants to add any further. In conjunction with this proposed plan, our Infrastructure Assets Manager and Parks and Leisure Manager are engaged in a Public Works long-term plan as well this year. So while there's a lot of good work going into how the building operates, there's also how we grow the teams into the future, and those are questions that we ask and that we've been trying to ascertain and make sure that we're working into the future and forward thinking with both these plans. I'll pass it to our Parks and Leisure Manager to see if there's a longer term number that she can put to your question, but those two things are being looked at in tandem.
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie and all of Council. When we did the needs assessment back in 2020, one of the deliverables there was to project out 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, up to 30. Not knowing for sure what the population base was going to be. The needs assessment did plan out to 30 years. I mean, a needs assessment is going to maybe be reviewed 20 years from now, but I would ascertain that this would take us to the next 20 years for sure.
Perfect, thank you. And if I can further on to that, looking at the main Public Works building itself, you talked about, its readiness for the likes of solar and things like that. I'm curious about its readiness for expansion. So, we saw in the town office here that there was actually the second story expansion put onto it at that point in time. And, looking at the site plan, the reality is the site plan, there's probably not enough room for expansion out, but there is potential for room for expansion up. Is this building designed with the potential for the future, whether that's 20, 30 years down the road, with expansion up in mind? Is it engineered in such a way that that would be a potential?
It is not intended to grow up. There is the potential with the storage for the archives to be repurposed for expansion in that direction. But realistically, in 30 years, there may be a need for some off-site secondary locations, to be very honest.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Deputy Mayor, I do have a couple other, but I'm more than happy to spread it around.
Oh, go ahead.
Excellent, thank you very much. So the next question that I have is in regards to the phased approach. Looking at the mapping and the overlay of the site, obviously many of the new facilities overlap some existing facilities and so on, and I'm sure this has been contemplated, but I'm looking just for a little bit of an overlay of it. So there's many instances that would require the disruption or removal of current in-service buildings or items. So how will we mitigate this during the construction process to continue to ensure we accommodate our day-to-day operations while we reconfigure and rebuild out the site?
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie, thank you for the question. As you saw in the phasing plan, there are elements of the building that, like for the first phase, that has some site upgrades as well as a new admin building. So that does take up space that we otherwise would be used to operations. So operational effectiveness is key when you go into these phased approaches, which is partially why they're phased, so that you don't have to shut down the whole site all at once and we don't have, us as a town and as our public works staff would tell you, they don't really get to call the snow and say, we'd like a day off, please. So we do have to take operational effectiveness into consideration with these plans, and these plans are mindful of that to limit disruption and difficulties that workers would face in terms of us implementing it. That said, as Councillor Plechko and others on council have noted, that we have a very resilient, a very good team to pivot and make sure that we're working to the longer term goals of the town as it goes into the future.
Excellent, thank you. So next on my list. Turning to page 166 in our package, it's the overlay of the existing Public Works building. We did hear today about the age of that building. It's already in and around that 50 years old. I know it has had some renovations done to it at some point in time. We see a dollar figure attached in this report to the actual replacement of that building. And I've just had kind of two questions. So again, looking at the age and condition, is a renovation the best option versus a complete replacement? And what would be the cost difference between a renovation and replacement? And given the benefits that a replacement would allow in the design and the configuration of it, what were kind of the thought processes that went in on that in regards to going with a renovation of what I'll call a very old building versus a complete new building for that, that phase?
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie and all of council. Another part of the needs assessment did include a full condition assessment of the existing buildings. That also led to the recommendation of remaining on this current site as opposed to starting fresh somewhere new. The structural integrity of the buildings is sound. Therefore, it was recommended that they still had a lot of years of life in them. So a cost for a replacement building, I don't have that offhand. But the repurposing of that building is the most effective use of that current structure.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I just have two left on mine, if I may, Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much. In phase one, there's kind of two parking lots. There's what's seemingly a main parking lot, and the other one to the western side. It's the seasonal unmarked parking area, and I think it's about 40 some odd stalls. So obviously that is to recognize the fact we have a very seasonal staff in the summer. We add many positions in there. They need places to park. I'm just curious, is there an intended usage of that space out of season? So, basically, I guess it would be from that October to about April timeframe when we do not have that seasonal staff. Is that kind of a dual purpose area, or is it simply just a parking lot that when we don't have seasonal staff will just remain empty?
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie and all of council, it's a parking lot. So there is no proposed use in the off-season at this time. Not to say that we couldn't come up with a use. It could potentially, and I'm just spitting ideas here, given its proximity, it could be because it's outside of the fenced area, and we did that on purpose to keep the site secure. Any sort of public interaction activities could take place there, but there's no contemplated additional use other than parking.
Okay. Thank you. And then just lastly that I have here is you touched briefly on the Rotary Recycling Center. We hear from residents as it is today that is a very well-used facility, and I've noticed quite often that it's full, and that's a good thing. We want to divert as much as we can. But as we continue to push towards environmental responsibility and waste stream diversion, we're likely to need an increase and an enhancement on our recycling program and therefore on our recycling facilities. I don't see a contemplation of a potential expansion of that recycle center in that plan, and I know that may be a bit of a separate plan, but what I'm more concerned is just because of its current site location. What capacity do we have to expand that recycling center in its current location in conjunction with this plan? And again, if you're able to, approximately how many years worth of room, if you want to call it that, do you estimate that we would have left there?
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie, Thank you for the question. I think as you framed in there, the recycling center isn't currently in the scope of the phasing that's presented tonight. The items that you brought up about how the recycling center is a very coveted service that we provide to the town and the residents is well noted through the people that operate that over on the site. It is something that we could look to talk more broadly in a separate stream outside of this site, but right now it's not in this current presentation. I'll ask if the manager of Parks and Leisure has anything to add on the site's growth potential over time, or things that have been looked at maybe in tandem.
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie and all of council, expansion of the recycling center on this site was not within the scope of this project. So I know that to the north, there's a slight area of expansion space, but it was not contemplated to be included in this project.
Okay, thank you. And just a general comment on that, I think, you know, given that it is all town-owned land, I'm kind of surprised to hear that that it wasn't really included in it. I mean, I know they are two separate facilities, but being in the same location, being that the configuration of one definitely impacts the other one, and so on and so forth. You know, I think, and based on feedback and based on what we've heard, to me it sounds like we are at capacity there as it is now. So, you know, that's another need that is going to come forward to council and that we are going to have to contemplate. And it would have been nice if we could have seen if there was potential for this to stay on site, because the other opportunity that exists is that rotary recycling center could be moved somewhere else. And that opens up a very large portion area here that could have, again, played into the phasing and the consideration for layout of structures in here. So, you know, I'm a little surprised. I think, again, the plan we have in front of us is a fantastic plan. And I know we did talk again a little bit at Strat Plan about our waste diversion and how that was going to look. So I'm sure we will have some more conversations about that. And, you know, thankfully it looks like we're not till phase 3, phase 4 that sort of area of the yard starts to get impacted. So maybe there is some opportunities to kind of tweak and adjust this if it is deemed that an expansion is necessary and that staying on the same site is beneficial, or if moving to a different site, and then that may change a few things that occur here. So thank you very much for all your answers this evening. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Meyer.
Just to follow up on my fellow councillors' commentary there, I would like to hear administration's, just in terms of the characterization of the recycling center being at capacity, if administration could provide some commentary there.
Your worship, through the Councillor Mayor, with respect to the I guess the level of service that we're currently offering through the recycle center, externally from this design, it's something that we are talking about both internally and with our regional partners about opportunities to realize different ways to deliver better services, or the same or better services to the town residents for recycling. Like I said earlier, it is a coveted service that we hear a lot from residents that they appreciate. To talk about how it's at capacity, we are always looking for ways to make the service better and more accessible to residents within the town. I don't have any specific comments or concerns at the capacity level, but I know that when I have heard from residents, it's, you know, we'd always like more. What can we do? And we're always exploring those opportunities wherever we can.
Thank you. And back to Councillor Pleshko.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just I want to touch a little bit of base with what Councillor Laurie mentioned. The expansion of that building, I guess I assumed that the building was expandable. And I think that's now is a good time when you're going out to that to have a look at that, because costs associated with that are much less today than they will be down the road if that was something that was needed. Now, I understand that as the town grows, we may need to look at off-site different places to house other things as well. But I think overall, your employee base will be based out of one location and dispersed from there in the mornings. So maybe that is something that we can look at that will have an expandable opportunity. The other thing that I would wonder a little bit about too is when you look at the phase plan, phase one, when you're developing that yard, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to cut costs at this point in time as well, to level what needs to be leveled for the future of what's going to be on. I know there's a couple of buildings there that house a little bit of stuff at this time, but maybe for the short term, we could do something other than house it in there and get rid of that so that we have a nice site that's prepped so that we're not having to disrupt the whole place as we go along. So just some considerations that we should probably consider just listening to a couple of the questions that were on. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pleshko. I do have one additional question before we move forward here this evening. Just looking at the numbers in our corporate plan, this particular project was scheduled for 2026, and the number that we have in there is 6.3 million. Did some quick math based on the numbers that were presented to us here, and we're over 13 and a half. Now, the little disclaimer on the bottom there said 30 to 40% increase, but we're looking at 200% in terms of more than double. And so certainly a phased approach, I think, speaks to, you know, some of the increased costs there. My concern, though, is around some of the other future capital projects that have been discussed and have started to move forward a little bit into those planning stages. And so with the cost of this particular facility, even in a phased approach, doubling what was originally in the corporate plan, just looking for some commentary on how this may affect some of our future capital projects.
Deputy Mayor, thank you for the question. So as part of this phasing plan, you are correct. 2026 currently has that number that you brought up for 6 million and as an earmark. And right now, what's before council is the update and the desire to refine those costs and try and bring a stronger clarity for future financial impacts and discussion to consider along other priorities within the town. With the $6 million in 2026, that was for the original phase one construction, and so this and the note that you pointed to on the presentation for the I believe it was 30-40% increase. I know that's something that comes up a lot in the news right now. There are certainly some market modifiers that I won't name specifically here tonight that we keep hearing through the news, and this is and that is only to just say that there has been a lot of effort on the team's part to bring accurate numbers to date right now, and as we get these final documents done, those numbers will be further refined to provide council clarity and limit risks if for consideration against other projects should they want to consider them.
As well, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'd like to provide a few comments on that particular question as well. I think maybe two things I'll comment on. So the phased approach that you see in front of you, we believe there's always pros and cons to every way, whatever you may be looking to do. Certainly, there's some pros to phasing things in, but it is also an alternative that does space out the capital cost to a degree. And along that line, the intent is to, be able to balance off with other large capital expenditures. I guess is one I'll say is my simplest way to say that. So the second thing I would add into the dialogue, so to speak, would be, council has in front of you over the course of the next, say 2 years, a couple big ones. We obviously, council has talked about a recreation center. There's been a capital longer term or out year capital commitments to potential cemetery. That has also been talked about quite a bit. And part of our challenge is working through the timing of the designs and refining numbers. And as the GM just mentioned, not lost on anybody in this room that some of the inflationary challenges throughout the globe are hitting us just like everybody else. So what we're attempting to do is to provide some paths forward for these projects that will both be housed within the overall corporate plan, but also have a degree of flexibility so that we can move forward or pause as our environment allows. Just a quick, I'll summarize the last part. We will be watching the timing of these costs coming in and how do they relate to other capital projects, and then also how does that relate to our corporate planning process. One of the things that ultimately is a significant task of any council is to weigh the cost of projects both on their own, but then also in comparison to other projects. What we will do our level best to provide council is that as these things move into the chambers, that the entire picture does stay in front of you. Again, typically that's done clearly and specifically through the corporate plan process itself. But in those instances when we have to bring in costing on a couple of these major capital projects, we will do our best to provide the impacts into the longer term capital projects as well. I'll stop there. I hope that was relatively clear, but.
No, and I appreciate the commentary, and it actually answers my next question, around the, possibility that when we're looking at final costing of something like this that was projected 2026, it's the feeling that I get is that we're maybe looking at a sooner timeline than 2026, especially if we're looking at, final design and whatnot. And there are things on the book that are important to members of our community. And I think, as you said, having that full picture before making the absolute go-ahead, moving things around, adjusting, as you've spoken to in terms of some of those capital projects. So I appreciate the clarity there. With that, let's get the motion on the floor, please. And I'll ask Councillor Laurie.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I'm very pleased to make this motion. I'll move that Town Council direct administration to proceed to final design of the Public Works building.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. And to Council, any questions, comments, debate, and discussion? Councillor Laurie.
Thank you very much. Again, I just want to express great appreciation for what's come forward to us today. Obviously, every time we talk about things, circumstances change. And as you mentioned, the marker that's in the corporate plan right now for 2026, what we're seeing today is significantly different from that. But if we look at, whether it's our rec center or any of our other projects, as they continue to come forward, they evolve. As we know more, they evolve. As we look at the different processes, they evolve. I think this is one of the huge investments that we need to make in our community for the betterment of our community. And this isn't necessarily one of the glitzy, glamoury, pretty projects that our community members are going to get to walk in the front doors and enjoy every single aspect of it. But what this truly does is this is something that our employees need. And our employees need this in order to provide the level of service that we want to see throughout our community and throughout our town. And so providing our employees with the tools necessary for them to do their job will not only allow them to do their job, but it will also give them great pride in the investment that we as council and the organization has made in them and their abilities to do this. I would like to point out, as we do go towards the final design, some of the questions and the feedback that we heard tonight, I would love to see maybe some of those integrated in if possible, or at least a better understanding maybe of kind of how we're looking at this, because ultimately this is setting our community up for the future. And we do have to look at what that 10, 20, 30 years from now looks like. But I think more so from the years from now, it's also the size of our community. It's been very well recognized in our strategic plan, and I was very fortunate to sit in with the EMRB at their committee of the whole meeting last Friday, where they talked about the adjustments to the growth plan. And, what took us X number of years to get from 10,000 to 20,000 is going to be a much shorter time span to go from 20 to 30. And again, it will be exponential from there on top. So while we continue to move forward like this, I think that future lens is one that is very strongly required. I appreciate the comments about this may not in the future be our only public works site, because I believe that to be true. I think when we look at servicing the needs of our community, we have to look at what is best suited. I truly believe that this site and this location is still the best for our community for now and for the immediate future, because it is centralized. It prevents some of the challenges that we would face had this been moved off into the industrial area, the additional commuting time back and forth for equipment and so on and so forth. But as we grow, we may find that some satellite areas definitely need some equipment housed there, and maybe we do need a department that moves out of this area and into another specific area for whatever reason. But again, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm very happy to see this plan. It's been a long time coming. It's been something that since I got on council, I'm very passionate about how we support our employees for the work that they do for our community, and I'm very happy to see this today and look forward to having the final design and the request for decision on the funding to come forward to council as well.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Plechko.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, again. So I don't want to echo everything that Councillor Laurie said, but I think it's come clear that there's a number of things that were suggested here tonight that move this project forward. I think one of the things that we have to remember sitting at this council chambers is that as we build projects, shovel-ready projects are helpful projects to our community. It's an opportunity for us to beat on local governments. Now's a good time. I said it once already today. I'll say it again. We're coming into an election. It's a need for the community. Maybe there's some funding. Maybe there's some low interest rate loans. There's a number of things that may come into play. And I want to commend administration for bringing this project forward. But not only that, I think every time we get a project that gets brought forward, we all sit here and get a little antsy, a little excited, because it's a big cost. It's more taxpayers' money that we're trying to be cautious how we spend. But one thing administration does for us when we do this is they go looking. And they look hard for anything that can subsidize a project for us, that helps us to make an easier decision sitting at this table that's a less impact on our community. So again, this is something that has been needed for a long time. And unless I hear something totally different at this table that I've been hearing for today, it's a project that I look forward to seeing the final design and some opportunity for us to move that forward. It is a great location. It's probably one of the questions that I ask most to most people. And, at this strat planning that we were there, I think, Brett, I must have asked you 2 or 3 times, and I apologize for that. But every time I think of something that we can do within our community, I want to be convinced that it is the best spot for it. And truly, with what you have said, I'm confident that this is a spot we can grow out of, even though I do believe we will need some satellites in the near future if our community grows to 30,000 people quicker than most of us think it will. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Plechko. Any additional questions, comments, discussion, debate? Well, and as Councillor Plechko said, I don't feel the need to echo what's been said, but certainly appreciate the work that's gone into this project. And I think has been shared this evening, we all recognize the importance and value that it brings to our community, and how it will enhance the work that our public works staff does to increase efficiency and the service levels provided to our community. So thank you for that. Council, this evening we've reviewed the update before us. We've heard the presentation from administration and have had the opportunity to ask our questions for clarity and understanding. The motion is to direct administration to proceed to final design of the Public Works Building project. And with that, I will call to question. All in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to 9.3 of our agenda. This is our fourth quarter report. We'll pass it over to administration for a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'll be brief. This is the quarterly report that council sees quarterly. In front of you is a great deal of information, some stats. I know that we also use this moving forward as a bit of a messaging out to the community about some of the stuff that we do that may go somewhat unnoticed from time to time, but by the general public, but we try to get some messaging out around it. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I will simply stop there. We're certainly able to answer any questions council may have regarding the Q4 quarterly report.
Perfect, and thank you for that. Always love seeing these come through chambers and seeing kind of the big picture of what is going on in our community. So thank you for preparing that report for us this evening. With that, council, any questions for clarity and understanding on the Q4 report? Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. By my count, I have 14 questions, but I will actually reserve many of those for an email. I will draft an email up to the town manager with questions, a lot of the questions that I have, and I will CC council on that. Just a couple ones that bubble to the top, though, if I may.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm just finding my page number here. Here we go. So on page 183, it talks about the training hours for our fire services. And as I look at those, it shows quite a drastic difference from 2022 comparative to the prior years. So for our 2022 training hours, we're down 1,737 hours, or 25% year over year from 2021, and 911 hours, or 15% year over year from 2020. And then Q4 in particular shows a decrease of over 500 hours from 2021 and over 1,700 hours from 2020. So I'm just wondering if we can get a little bit of context and explanation on that significant reduction in training hours over the previous years.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie, for sure. Some of the larger numbers were certainly on a more virtual training program, and we did have a lot of higher participation in that virtual world, simply because people were at home and able to participate versus potentially not being able to leave their home and come down to the fire hall. So when I spoke to the fire chief, that certainly factored into some of the training hours. We also do run some courses with our new recruits and other firefighters at the station. The timing of the testing and the completion of those courses ran over a couple of quarters. So I think I don't have the stats in front of me, but the Q3 stats were a bit higher in terms of training versus the Q4. So some of the course load that was completed in 2022 was done in a different quarter than 2024, the previous year. So as an example, if a pump course was completed in 2021, the majority of that was done in Q4 versus this year, a lot of it was done in Q3 with the test happening in Q4.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's why I looked at the year over year as well as the Q4. And I said I do see a significant difference. And I'm not sure I quite understand your explanation in regards to if we're looking at 1,737 hours, excuse me, from 2022, less than 2021. I don't know if I'm quite tying together how a virtual presence versus an in-person presence on that, but maybe we can get a little context on that. Another question just under the protective services was under the incidents heading on page 184, there was a note that 2 peace officers were restricted to desk work. Can you just expand on that a little?
Your worship, again, through the Councillor Laurie, certainly the job is quite demanding, and sometimes there's leave that people require in terms of medical leave. So injury happens, modified duties. As you're aware, if you see a uniformed officer in a marked vehicle, there's an expectation from the public. So from time to time, when we do have a person rehabbing with a knee operation, so they're tied to a desk. We also have another person that has some back issues that is going through some rehab and certainly has modified duties. So we have another person going into an operation pretty quickly here, so we likely are going to have another person on modified duties for a period of time also. So most of that is related to workplace injury, where they have to do some modified duties for a specified amount of time in order for them to rehab that injury.
Thank you for that. And so when we do have people that are on the modified duty and like I said, are not able to be in uniform out in a vehicle meeting that expectation, I guess, how do we meet that expectation of the resident? How do we ensure that, you know, while the work that they're doing at a desk, I can guarantee you is incredibly valuable, and they are working on files and probably supporting the officers who are out generating those files, but how do we make sure that we do still have an adequate number of officers out on the street and out within our community enforcing essentially what they're there to do?
Your worship, through to Councillor Laurie. Certainly there's some shift modification to ensure that our hard hit hours are covered. I wouldn't suggest we have the same amount of coverage, especially if you've got one officer that's not on shift for a period of time, then it's impossible to, we don't have casual CPOs that we can bring in. It's a specialized position and it requires an authority from the provincial government. So it's not as quick as replacing a usual position around the office. So certainly we'll modify the duties, modify the shifts so that we can cover those high need areas and high need times so that we're still providing an elevated level of service, if not pretty close to what we would typically provide.
Okay, thank you. And Deputy Mayor, just a few more from me. Thank you. No specific page number into this, but again, with protective services, and I promise you I'm not picking on you, I do have a couple others for you. We see great detailed explanation of both our fire service and our protective service in the quarterly reports. We see fantastic statistics, and it's great to actually see how that represents to our community. But what I don't see anything in here is in regards to our automated enforcement. And that does still exist, and occasionally we get an update on our automated enforcement and we see how that is being managed in our community and what that's generating. Is that something that we can have added to future quarterly reports? Do we get statistics like that we can actually have added in here so that we can be transparent with our community about how active automated enforcement is within the town?
Your worship, through to Council, Deputy Mayor, through to our worship tonight. Through to Councillor Laurie, certainly we can do that. We do get some reports from our contractor from time to time, so we can collate those into a quarterly and add them in this report pretty easily.
Excellent, thank you. On to Family Fest, if I may. Page 186, it mentions 1,600 people attending Family Fest. I personally attended Family Fest, and I think there were 1,600 people in one small area. It was a very, very busy evening. I'm just wondering, like, what's our method of count? How do we try and even make a determination? We don't have turnstiles. We don't have people sitting there counting as people come and go. But I was genuinely surprised at that number. I thought it was very low compared to being there.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie again. Certainly, I think the best way that our staff are able to calculate and tabulate, short of putting a clicker on their thumb and walking around, which is fairly impossible to try and track every single person. They go to the vendors and how many hamburgers did you bring? We went through 1,600. It's not an exact science because I could eat 3 of those. But I think from the staff looking around and seeing, well, 1,600 went fairly quickly, that's a fairly reasonable number for us to say at least 1,600 people were there. Certainly with that particular event, there's a lot of people that come in and out. I would say probably towards fireworks, there's a lot of people that don't come for the specific events, but they come for fireworks. So there's probably a bit of a 200 to 300 added to the overall total once the fireworks start. So certainly I think 1,600 would probably be on the moderate side in terms of estimation. Is still a fair size for an event of that nature for the number of hours that that event does partake. So certainly that's a number that the staff can estimate based on food quantity consumed.
Thank you very much. I'm sure Councillor Meyer could add to that with the popcorn. I know he was busy serving it that evening. Just one more, if I may, Deputy Mayor. And this one's regard to the residential permit numbers on page 196. We see that the residential building permits for Q4 is significantly lower than both last year and the average. Our year-over-year average still looks good. It looks like we're right in and around there, but you know, with a weak Q4, I'd like to think we probably could have actually exceeded our average. Is there any specific indication or anything that kind of stands out as to why our Q4 was much weaker in the permits than anticipated?
Deputy Mayor, through the Councillor Laurie, thank you for the question. I don't have a silver bullet answer for this. There's a number of factors that go into building permit starts, as you're aware. Q4 while the numbers here show the year-over-year averages being vastly different, it is expected to be it's usually a slower period in the Q4 point for the billing starts. However, this year, one thing that I recall hearing from staff and builders, not all the time, but somewhat consistently, was just availability of products and ability to get started with materials, raw materials being such a difficult thing to start with. Everything from pipes, wood, finishing products, they had to make choices of their permitting and choices on starts. So as those things clear up, I would expect those numbers to renormalize. And as you pointed out in the year-over-year statistics, they're still quite consistent.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Any other questions for clarity and understanding this evening? Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I haven't fully formed a question on this one, so I might ramble. Actually, I probably won't ramble. I'll probably keep it fairly short. I'm just wondering if administration can help me to understand some of the information coming from the social media analytics. It's embarrassing as a millennial to admit that I don't quite appreciate all these breakdowns. I also noticed that we don't generally have a comparison from one quarter to the previous quarters. That might maybe help a little bit, but help me to understand the idea of impressions, reach, and engagements in terms of our top performing post on Facebook was a Happy Halloween from town staff. You guys all look like you're at Halloween. So anyhow, but impressions, reach, engagement. If someone could kind of give me an idea, what I'm trying to really gauge, and I think coming from our strat planning, I've hit it a couple of times, but to understand the difference between quality and quantity of these analytics.
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Meyer and all of Council. So I'll just reference on the right-hand side of page 178 where the social media stats are provided is sort of a summary increase or adjustment on a quarterly basis. So there is sort of an acknowledgement of the shift in audience growth over the quarter. We don't compare to the previous year's stats. We're try to keep the stats simplified in terms of the overall adjustment in where our audience numbers are for each social media account that we track. So just a reference point to that. In terms of the impressions versus reach versus engagement, I would say if you move from left to right across that table, the engagement is probably the highest quality of interaction that you would have on social media in terms of people actually either providing some sort of acknowledgement or comment or sharing of some kind versus going towards the left where it says impression or reach is a lesser level of engagement. So just speaking to your question about quality versus quantity, we want to reach the engagement side with higher numbers versus the impression side. Does that help provide some clarity?
It does. Just if I could keep going, in terms of the top performing Instagram post, say for example the Toys for Tickets, we see impressions, reach, and engagements. Is there any back checking to say, to compare this to say how many people actually participated in that program and then compare those numbers and these impressions, reach, and engagements to, say, previous years' participation and their impressions, reach, and engagements?
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Meyer, I would say that that level of analysis really only would occur if we are looking at communications planning for a specific project from one year over the next in terms of where we might want to make some adjustment in terms of where we're putting our emphasis or effort, or there's a specific target or need to track. So we have the ability, I would say, to do that type of analysis and feedback for specific project, but I wouldn't say that we do it on an ongoing or project-by-project basis because of just, determining whether there's a value or a need for it. That would be our intent. So the ability is there, but we don't always do it for every single project or every single campaign, if that answers the question that you're looking for.
Yeah, it gives me something to think about anyhow.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Any additional questions, Councillor Hansard?
Deputy Mayor, you often ask for questions. All that council has to say is not a question. Sometimes we just have a comment. This is one of the most enjoyable things for me to see in a council package. So I appreciate everybody's input into this quarterly report. I truly enjoy reading them. You guys do a first-class presentation of the information. So I just want you to know that all of the work, I mean, we read it, we will be required to read it, but I think it's so wonderful to see all of this in one document that the residents can get their hands on. Is it available to the residents in a digital format? Because a lot of people won't come in here and pick up a copy. Do they get this on the website in its entirety?
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Hansard and all of council, yes, we do publish the quarterly reports on our website. We also augment that with social media campaigns to invite residents and visitors to have a look at the quarterly report, and we draw out some, bits of nuggets of information that might interest people to go in and have a look at the report itself and reflect on some of the programs and services that have been provided at that time.
The photography, Mr. Deputy Mayor, is also wonderful, and I really appreciated that. I particularly love seeing Greg Hanna's picture in this, Mr. Mural Guide himself. So thank you for this, and I had a lovely time reading it. Actually, I went back and read about a third of it a second time in order to take it all in. And our little town is not a little town anymore. We're a large town, and it's good to see the growth and everything from the statistics. So I do appreciate it. That's all, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard, for those comments and that question. Are there any further questions or comments on the fourth quarter report? Councillor Meyer.
Yes, that actually reminds me, the winter light up. I know this is more just a comment, so not a question, but a comment to administration. With Edmonton not having a traditional Christmas tree light up, the opportunity for Stony Plain to possibly expand our reach there and appeal to people outside the community. I'm just curious, if administration, I don't know how they'd know, if Edmonton plans to not do that again, and B, if we have any plans to capitalize on possibly something that the city may or may not be doing.
Oh, Mr. Deputy Mayor, they're all starting at me, so I'll try and answer this one for you. Through to Councillor Meyer. Certainly, I'm not sure if that was a one-off decision by the City of Edmonton. We would have to track that through 2023 and closer to the Christmas break to see if that's a permanent decision by them. I do know our program coordinators across the region are quite connected with each other, so I'm not sure if we would like to advertise to the City of Edmonton to come and watch our tree be lit. That I don't know if we could have that capacity out here. So certainly I think people throughout the region do look for special events like what we have for the Christmas light up and our light display at Rotary Park, and similar to City of Spruce Grove with their Central Park. I think people do travel the region to see the different activities that we do have, and people put it upon themselves to come out and enjoy the different and unique things that we have to offer as communities across the region.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. I'm going to jump in here on page 176 And looking just the bottom right corner, it says 55 local businesses have signed up for the Digital Economy Program, something I'm not familiar with, just looking for some information there.
Certainly, Deputy Mayor, through you and all of council. This is a program that we conducted in partnership with a regional agency called Business Link. So it was hosted and provided throughout the region as an opportunity for local businesses to engage in business development services around transitioning their business model to serve a more of an online audience or consumers, customers, just to broaden their market base. And so we did have what I would consider to be a really good uptake on that program. And I know our economic development team has been working with our regional partners on tracking the outcomes of that and looking at, sort of where that program might go. So just a nugget of stats for now, but certainly something that we're looking at where that program might go in the future, because it has certainly had some good traction this year with our local business community.
For a first year to have 55 local businesses, I think that's great to see. So thank you for that additional commentary. The one thing I want to highlight, and we often get asked what our role or our partnership with Edmonton Global does for us as a municipality. And I was excited to see that fleshed out just a little bit here, in this particular report related to investment attraction and 6 new leads, it looks like, in the quarter, 2 of them coming from Edmonton Global. And so, a small investment that we make, but there's a shared benefit there for our region, and we see here in this particular report for our community directly. And I think that's important for us to recognize and for us to share with our community that there are some prospects that come out of that partnership. So thank you for that, highlighting that for us here as well. With that, I'm going to ask Councillor Laurie with the motion this evening, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I'll move the Town Council accepts the 2022 fourth quarter report for information.
Thank you, sir. Any final questions, comments, discussion, or debate from council this evening? 13 more. Councillor Laurie's got, no, that's good. All right. I think we're good there. So with that, again, we've had the opportunity to review the fourth quarter report for Q4 2022 and ask the questions that we had for clarity and understanding. So the motion before us is to accept this for information this evening. And with that, we'll call to question. All in favor? And that carries. Again, thank you to administration for that report. Again, always a highlight for me when I get the agenda package and have the opportunity really to celebrate what our community has been up to and what our staff are doing in support of our community. So thank you for that. That brings us to item 11 on our agenda, and that is council discussion, a time for council to share anything that we've heard from residents or experiences we've had with events around the community. And so we'll start this evening with Councillor Meyer, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Not much from me. I would just like to highlight our wonderful strat planning earlier in the week, or earlier last week, I should say. Appreciated all the discussion there, and that's all I have.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions to administration. First, on Veterans Boulevard at the CN crossing, both the north side and the south side, there's continual crossing of the median. This, as we know, is resulting in damage to the trees, to the grass, and it's also a safety factor. So I'm just wondering, are we currently doing anything to mitigate this or working on an action plan as to how we can prevent this in the future? It seems like something as simple as, our typical post and pole fencing along there, along that middle, that would prevent a vehicle from traversing it would be appropriate. Do we have any update on that?
Deputy Mayor, through the Councillor Laurie, thank you for the question. So nothing specific is in a plan to put fencing per se up right now. It's something we would have to, monitor and see how often and frequently this is coming up. As you know, the snow allows us to see the evidence of people doing this, and maybe there are certain areas that we could regroup and see if there's areas for improvement to prevent this behavior. Normally, the medians themselves are enough to deter people from trying this. But for right now, there isn't any current plans. We'd have to take a look into the issue a little deeper and see if there's other options, other opportunities we could do to prevent this action. If there were observed issues that would be falling to enforcement to follow up with.
Thank you, and this is something that has been continual since that road was completed and that median was in place. I know the original contractor was out there multiple times fixing the sod and the trees that were in that direct area, and then again in the winter time it becomes very obvious when somebody has done so. So it is a frequent problem. It is something that I think definitely needs some attention to it. So I'll follow up with an email on that as well, and hopefully we can get some continued monitoring and a solution there, as that comes out of the taxpayers' dollars every time we have to go out there and repair the landscaping and so on in the median. So I think it'd be prudent to stop that. Another one, in a couple areas of the town, I'm starting to notice where we do plowing that both fire hydrants and transit stops are either being obstructed or buried by snow due to those activities. Do we have a plan in place, or do we have a standard on how we would operate in order to prevent that?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie. Thank you for the question. I'd have to go back and circle back with our infrastructure assets group about exactly our practices with that. Generally, we've identified the locations where the hydrants are at, so that during our snow removal that they should be accessible after snow clearing for our services. I'd have to follow up on our level of service with the bus routes as well. I know that those are identified in our snow clearing plans as well. With I believe either our own forces or our contractor goes out and makes sure those are taken care of. So I would have to take that back and provide further clarity as to what's going on. If you do have locations that you've observed that you'd like us to follow up with, we would also welcome those too.
Thank you, and I will compile a list for you because there's many. So the last one I have in regards to a question, on Main Street over the last couple of weeks, I'm noticing that there are several of our full-size lampposts that are out, as well as almost all of the bollards, if not all of the bollards on the east side of the road have been out for quite some time. And then as well, along the seating areas where the lights were installed underneath the seating areas, it seems hit and miss as to which ones are illuminated and which ones aren't, even though I believe they all were at one point in time. Just wondering if that part of the project, if those have been turned over to the town already, if that's something that would still be on the original contract or under warranty, or is this something that we would need to take on and something that we have a plan to address?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Laurie. As you know, there are certain phases that are completed and handed over to town under FAC, and the others that are under warranty. We did receive this question today, and we are currently looking into it, so we would have more answers for that later as we address them, and something I could provide an update once I know.
Excellent, thank you very much. So no other questions. Again, I'll just echo the sentiments to our strategic planning that we held down in Sylvan Lake last week. It was a great opportunity to connect with council and administration to work on our plans moving forward. As I mentioned, it was great to have the EMRB out here in Stony Plain last Friday, going through their committee of the whole meeting and the update of their growth plan. And then, well done, Deputy Mayor Anderson, chairing your first council meeting. I think Mayor Choi may need to have a little bit of a fight to get his seat back there. I think we all enjoyed you being there this evening. So thank you very much. Job well done.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Hanser.
Top that. Deputy Mayor, I will speak to this must be the week or the month that schools in certain grades are working on learning who is serving them in elected positions in the municipal level, the provincial level, and the federal level. And I had a mother of a young fellow call me. He's 11 years old. And she put both of them on the phone. We had quite a discussion because they had a helper in the school who had helped him to confuse all three levels of government. The poor child thought Justin Trudeau was our mayor. And I had a lot of undoing there. She told me that she had trouble finding our organizational chart on our town website, which I then immediately go in. I found that not to be very user-friendly. I had a heck of a time finding the organizational chart, but because we had come out of strategic planning and there was that organizational chart in one of our packages of material, I took a picture, scanned it, sent it to them, and he used that in his homework assignment. And then I told them all the people's names who filled all the positions, and he got a 100 on his social studies project. Could we please have the organizational chart be really easy to find? That seems like a rather simple thing. And even for myself, coming back to council, I went looking for that organizational chart because it helps to put people in the right place and find out what positions are still there and what isn't. Also, I'm going to speak to strategic planning because it's important for those who may be still tuned in and those in council chambers, that in this councilor's viewpoint, strategic planning is singularly the most important thing that council will do in a given year. Because without it, we lose our way. And a lot of what happens in council meetings could become meaningless. We always keep in front of us what the goals are, not just of our council, because we're still carrying forward last council and even the councils before that, their long-range strategic planning. We concentrate on 3 years, and I found this year was particularly good from all aspects. And I really want to let our public know that not only is this such an important thing that council does, but this council did a really good job. And we don't always agree on things, and we had some really good discussions and came out of this with a plan that helps drive our town forward. And I'm hoping that the residents and our taxpayers will see the value of this and watch as it plays out, because we all now have a very firm footing. This was our strategic plan, and even the newest members of our council own it fully. So thank you very much to everybody who contributed and participated. And if anyone out there has any questions, I know we'd be happy to help in any way we can.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Councillor Pleshko.
I'm not sure there's much left to say. Strat plan was very well. Thanks very much to the SLT team. You did a phenomenal job on leading us and guiding us down the path to a new and an improved Stony Plain. I do look forward to seeing that applied here at the table, not just talked about, but actually applied here at the table, environmentally wise, and the new Stony moving forward. So I look forward to that. But tonight I want to thank you, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Anderson, for chairing this meeting tonight. I'm guessing the school teacher has shown in you today that you've done a lot of planning prior to coming to this meeting. The review process that you do at the very end of it brings me back to my school days. So I thank you very much, and I agree with Councillor Laurie. Maybe Councillor Choi should become a councillor. Just easy on how I said that, because it's not detrimental to anything. It's just we get to take a little bit of a fun at them once in a while. But you did a very phenomenal job today, and I'm glad that you were able to get through that process, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
I appreciate the sentiments. You can take a teacher out of a classroom, but the teacher stays with you. And so, certainly lessons learned in my time in grade 6. Speaking to Councillor Hansard, I actually get to teach municipal government and provincial government, to my students. And I don't know if I've shared this story publicly, but, very quickly, what? You know the mayor of Stony Plain? What? You know the mayor of Spruce Grove? Could you introduce us to Bill Gates? I said, well, if I could introduce you to Bill Gates, I probably wouldn't be your teacher. So anyway, but, certainly feel like a bit of a rock star having the privilege to serve on council going back into my classroom. But with that being said, it is a privilege to borrow the mayor's chair for an evening, and certainly provides a great appreciation for all that he does for us as council and for our municipality. And so he's not here, but thanks goes out to him and to council administration for making my first go tolerable, I hope. It's been truly a privilege to sit with you here this evening. And with that, we'll adjourn. Thank you.